The city burns behind you, but you're too tired to run anymore. The groaning is everywhere now, not just from the infected shambling through the streets, but from the buildings themselves, settling into their final hours before the missile strike levels everything. You've watched friends turn, watched strangers claw at each other over scraps of food, watched humanity dissolve into something hungry and mindless. And somewhere in the back of your exhausted mind, you wonder how it started. How did one virus turn an entire city into a graveyard? How many times has this happened before? How many outbreaks has Umbrella Corporation caused, covered up, or profited from before the world finally noticed? The answer is more than you think, more than anyone talks about, because Raccoon City wasn't the first outbreak, and it definitely wasn't the last. For nearly 80 years, from secret laboratory experiments in the 1940s to global bioterror incidents in the 2020s, the Resident Evil universe has been defined by one consistent horror: humans engineering viruses that turn other humans into weapons, and those weapons inevitably escaping containment. Every outbreak follows the same pattern: corporate ambition, scientific hubris, inadequate safety protocols, and ordinary people paying the price when biology refuses to stay controlled. Over the next hours, we're going to walk through every major outbreak in Resident Evil's timeline. Not just Raccoon City, though we'll spend considerable time there. We're talking about the Arklay Mountains mansion where it all went public, the Antarctic facility where the Ashford family's legacy collapsed, the Spanish village where an ancient parasite became a modern weapon, the African desert where Wesker nearly achieved his vision of forced evolution, the Bayou house where a family became test subjects. We're covering training facility massacres, island incidents, ship infestations, airport attacks, and the global pandemic that nearly ended civilization itself. Every virus, every outbreak, every time containment failed and people died screaming. The core idea threading through every one of these incidents is simple but devastating. Bioweapons don't stay contained. Humans keep building them anyway. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the darkest corners of survival horror, go ahead and hit that like button to help other fans discover this video, and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing our late night community check in from everywhere. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's begin. Chapter 1: The Progenitor and the Birth of Engineered Horror. To understand every outbreak that follows, we need to start at the source. Not with zombies shambling through city streets, but with 3 ambitious men standing in a West African cave in December 1966, staring at a flower that would reshape human history in the worst possible ways. Oswell Spencer, Edward Ashford, and James Marcus weren't adventurers or botanists. They were wealthy intellectuals with backgrounds in genetics, virology, and aristocratic entitlement who'd become obsessed with human evolution. Spencer, in particular, carried a vision that bordered on megalomania. He believed humanity was stagnant, that natural selection had failed to produce the superior beings he thought should inherit the earth. What humanity needed, in his view, was a catalyst, something that could separate the strong from the weak, create a new ruling class of enhanced humans while the inferior masses were culled. This ideology wasn't unique to Spencer. Eugenics movements had infected academic and political circles throughout the early 20th century, and World War II had demonstrated what happened when those ideologies gained state power. But Spencer's approach was different. He wasn't interested in selective breeding or genocide through conventional means. He wanted a biological mechanism that would perform the selection naturally, allowing only the genetically superior to survive and evolve, while everyone else simply died. The stairway of the sunflower, Sonnentrep, provided that mechanism. Growing in a cave system beneath a fictional West African region, this flower produced something unprecedented. a virus that integrated with host DNA and caused rapid, catastrophic mutations. The local Endopia tribe had legends about the flower, stories of transformation and power. What mattered to Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus was the virus's potential. They called it the progenitor virus, and it became the foundation for everything that followed. The three men formed Umbrella Corporation in 1968, ostensibly a pharmaceutical company producing everyday medicines and healthcare products. The public face of Umbrella was benevolent: life-saving drugs, cutting-edge medical research, corporate philanthropy. The hidden reality was a bioweapons development program using progenitor as the base for creating viruses that could be weaponized, sold to governments and military organizations, and deployed as tools of warfare or control. The progenitor itself was unstable and largely ineffective as a weapon. Its effects were too unpredictable. Some hosts died immediately. Others experienced mutations that rendered them immobile or non-functional. The mortality rate was extremely high. But the small percentage who survived showed enhanced physical capabilities, increased strength, heightened aggression, resistance to pain. This proved to Spencer that the concept worked. Progenitor could separate strong from weak. It just needed refinement. Edward Ashford died in July 1968 during early progenitor research, reportedly from accidental exposure to the virus. His death left Spencer and Marcus as the primary architects of Umbrella's bioweapons program, though Ashford's children, Alexia and Alfred, would eventually continue their father's work in their own disturbing ways. James Marcus took the lead on refining progenitor into something more stable and controllable. He established a training facility and research center in the Arklay Mountains outside Raccoon City, where he conducted experiments that would define Umbrella's approach for decades. Test on human subjects without consent, prioritize results over ethics, and eliminate witnesses when necessary. Marcus's breakthrough came from an unexpected source: leeches. He discovered that leech DNA could stabilize progenitor's worst excesses, creating a hybrid virus that maintained the mutation-inducing properties while achieving much higher survivability in hosts. This stability marked the creation of what Umbrella designated the T-virus, also called the tyrant virus for its intended purpose, creating superhuman bioorganic weapons called tyrants that could be deployed in combat situations. The T-virus represented everything Spencer wanted. It was infectious, spreading through bodily fluids and creating secondary infections from initial hosts. It reanimated dead tissue, meaning casualties from the virus could continue functioning as threats. It caused predictable mutation patterns that could be directed through controlled exposure. And most importantly for Umbrella's business model, it created a problem that required Umbrella's solutions. If you released T-virus in an enemy population, you needed Umbrella's antiviral treatments, their bioorganic weapons to fight the infected, their containment protocols to manage the outbreak. By the early 1980s, Umbrella had multiple facilities conducting T-virus research: the Arklay Laboratory under Marcus's direction, the underground Nest facility beneath Raccoon City, where a young virologist named William Birkin pursued his own aggressive research agenda, various international facilities where different strains and applications were tested. The company had become exactly what Spencer envisioned: a shadow power that could influence global events through biological warfare while maintaining a respectable public image. But biology doesn't respect corporate hierarchies or containment protocols. The more facilities Umbrella operated, the more researchers they employed, the more test subjects they infected, the greater the probability that something would escape. And the first major outbreak was already taking shape, growing in test tubes and leech colonies in the Arklay Mountains, waiting for the right moment to remind humanity that viruses designed to kill don't distinguish between intended targets and their creators. The stage was set. Umbrella had created its weapon. Now came the part where the weapon turned on them. Chapter 2: Arklay Mountains and the Mansion Incident. May 11th, 1998. A medical procedure goes wrong in the Arklay laboratory. The T-virus, contained until this moment in controlled laboratory conditions, becomes airborne. The exact mechanism varies slightly depending on which account you follow, but the outcome is consistent. Staff members at the facility become infected. The virus spreads rapidly through the mansion and the laboratory complex hidden beneath it. Researchers who'd spent years studying T-virus suddenly find themselves on the receiving end of their own creation. Some die and reanimate as zombies, mindless hosts driven by the virus's need to spread. Others experience more extreme mutations, becoming Crimson Heads with enhanced speed and aggression. The facility's guard dogs are infected, transforming into Cerberus units, zombie dogs with exposed muscle and bone, capable of rapid pursuit. The infection doesn't stay contained within the mansion. It spreads into the surrounding mountains, carried by infected animals and potentially by groundwater contamination. Over the following months, hikers and campers in the region begin disappearing. Bodies turn up partially consumed, evidence of cannibalistic behavior. Local news reports strange sightings, people acting erratically, animals behaving aggressively. The Raccoon City Police Department receives missing persons reports with increasing frequency, but without understanding what they're actually dealing with. They file reports and send occasional patrols that find nothing conclusive. By July, the situation has escalated enough that the Raccoon Police Department STARS gets involved. The unit is divided into two teams. Bravo team is sent to investigate first, flying into the Arklay region on July 23rd to search for the missing persons and determine what's causing the bizarre incidents. Bravo team's helicopter experiences mechanical failure and crashes in the mountains. The team survives the crash but immediately encounters infected dogs and other bioorganic weapons. The team scatters. Some members are killed by Cerberus attacks. Enrico Marini, Bravo team's captain, realizes something is profoundly wrong but can't piece together the full scope. Rebecca Chambers, the youngest STARS member, survives through a combination of skill and luck that will define her career. What Bravo team doesn't know, what none of STARS knows at this point, is that their captain, Albert Wesker, is an Umbrella operative. He's been feeding information to the corporation for years, and the entire Arklay mission is a setup. Umbrella wants combat, data on their bioorganic weapons. They want to see how trained Special Forces personnel perform against Cerberus units, zombies, and more advanced creatures. STARS members are guinea pigs, test subjects who don't know they're being tested. When Bravo team fails to report in, Alpha team is sent after them on July 24th. Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and Wesker make up the primary members, along with pilot Brad Vickers. They locate Bravo team's crashed helicopter, but find no survivors in the immediate area. Then the Cerberus dogs attack, and Alpha team experiences firsthand what Bravo team couldn't warn them about. The dogs kill one team member immediately. Joseph Frost is torn apart while the others watch. Vickers panics and takes off in the helicopter, leaving the remaining team stranded. With infected dogs pursuing them, Alpha team runs through the forest until they reach the Spencer Mansion, an elaborate structure that should have been abandoned but clearly isn't. They take shelter inside, and the nightmare escalates from there. The mansion is a tomb dressed as a home. Zombies wander the halls. Former staff and researchers who died when the outbreak began. The architecture is deliberately confusing, filled with elaborate puzzles that serve no practical purpose unless you understand that Oswald Spencer designed this place as both research facility and personal monument. Doors require strange keys. Passages open only when obscure items are placed in specific locations. The mansion is a test, and STARS members have to navigate it while fighting creatures that should not exist. Chris and Jill, depending on whose perspective you follow. Encounter Rebecca, who's been trying to survive on her own after Bravo team's scattering. They find Richard Aiken, another Bravo member, severely wounded by a giant snake creature. They discover evidence that the mansion is connected to something much larger than a simple abandoned building. Documents reference Umbrella Corporation, mention something called the T-virus, describe experiments on human subjects. The deeper they go, the worse it gets. The facility beneath the mansion contains holding cells where human test subjects were kept. There are journals from researchers documenting the progression of T-virus infection in unwilling victims. They encounter Lisa Trevor, a woman who's been imprisoned and experimented on for decades, subjected to so many different virus strains that she's become something unique and unkillable, wearing the faces of her victims as masks while searching endlessly for her mother. Hunters appear in the mansion's lower levels, bioorganic weapons that are far more dangerous than zombies. These reptilian creatures were created intentionally, the result of T-virus applied to reptile DNA to produce fast, intelligent, lethal combatants. They can decapitate humans with single strikes, coordinate their attacks, and demonstrate that Umbrella wasn't just accidentally creating monsters. This was deliberate weapon design. Wesker's betrayal becomes clear when he leads the surviving STARS members into a trap. He reveals he's been working for Umbrella all along, that the entire mission was designed to gather combat data, that they were never supposed to survive. Wesker activates a Tyrant, the ultimate product of T-virus research, a humanoid bioweapon with exposed heart and massive clawed hand, engineered specifically for combat superiority. But the Tyrant doesn't obey Wesker. It impales him, apparently killing the traitor before turning on the STARS members. This is the cruel irony of bioweapons development. Even the creators can't guarantee control. Umbrella spent years and millions of dollars creating the Tyrant, and its first action is to kill one of their operatives. Chris or Jill, depending on the scenario, manages to defeat or escape the Tyrant long enough to trigger the mansion's self-destruct system. Spencer had installed this failsafe specifically for situations like this, when containment failure required eliminating all evidence. The surviving STARS members make it to the helipad, where Brad Vickers, overcoming his earlier panic, returns to evacuate them. The mansion explodes behind them as they escape, destroying the facility and theoretically containing the outbreak. The surviving STARS members, Chris, Jill, Rebecca, Barry, and Brad, return to Raccoon City with evidence of Umbrella's crimes. They try to expose what happened, but Umbrella's influence runs deep. The Raccoon Police Department's chief, Brian Irons, is on Umbrella's payroll. Local government has been compromised by Umbrella's economic importance to the region. The evidence gets buried, the survivors are told to stay quiet, and officially the Arclay incident is classified as a tragic accident involving a deranged research team rather than corporate bioweapons development. STARS members begin investigating Umbrella independently, determined to bring down the corporation even without official support. Chris and Jill start building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for a reckoning. But while they're focused on exposing what happened in the Arclay Mountains, a much larger outbreak is already beginning. The T-virus didn't die in the mansion explosion. It had already escaped into Raccoon City's infrastructure, carried by rats and other vectors, and in the underground Nest facility, William Birkin is about to experience a catastrophic confrontation that will turn the city of 100,000 people into a mass grave. The Arclay incident was the warning shot. What comes next is the actual war. Chapter 3. The Raccoon City Outbreak begins. September 22nd, 1998. William Birkin stands in his underground laboratory, holding a sample case containing the culmination of his life's work, the G-virus, his improvement on the T-virus that promises even more dramatic mutation and potential military applications. He's been secretly negotiating with the United States government, planning to defect from Umbrella and sell his research for government protection and funding. It's a reasonable plan for someone who's realized that Umbrella views researchers as disposable assets. What Birkin doesn't account for is Umbrella having intelligence assets within the government. Learning about his planned betrayal before he can execute it, the corporation dispatches an Umbrella Security Service team, led by an operative named Hunk, to retrieve the G virus samples by any means necessary. With clear orders: secure the virus, eliminate the researcher. They don't negotiate. They open fire on Birkin, riddling him with bullets and leaving him dying on the laboratory floor. The team retrieves the case containing both T virus and G virus samples and prepares to extract. This is where Birkin makes the decision that dooms Raccoon City. Dying, desperate, he injects himself with the G virus. The transformation is immediate and horrific. His body mutates rapidly, growing to enormous size, developing massive clawed appendages and exposed organs. The G virus doesn't just reanimate dead tissue like T virus, it forces aggressive evolution, turning the host into something that's biologically immortal and capable of reproducing by implanting embryos into other hosts. The mutated Birkin pursues the USS team through the sewers beneath Raccoon City. He catches them in an underground passage and slaughters nearly everyone. During the massacre, the sample case is destroyed, vials containing T-virus smashing and spilling their contents into the sewer system. Rats consume the contaminated material, become infected, and carry the virus throughout the city's water supply and sewage infrastructure. Hunk is the only USS member to survive, escaping with a single intact G virus sample. His success means Umbrella technically achieves its objective. They recover some G virus material, but the T virus contamination spreading through Raccoon City's underground represents a failure of containment so catastrophic that it overshadows any intelligence victory. Over the following days, Raccoon City's population begins experiencing a mysterious illness. The symptoms start subtle: fever, confusion, aggression. People call in sick to work, visit hospitals complaining of flu-like symptoms. Medical facilities are overwhelmed but can't identify the cause. Then the deaths begin, and the dead don't stay dead. The T-virus's most effective transmission mechanism is its ability to reanimate corpses. A person dies from the infection, and the virus hijacks their brainstem, forcing basic locomotion and creating an overwhelming drive to bite and consume living flesh. Each zombie that's created becomes a vector for further infection. The bite transmits the virus to new victims, who go through the same cycle: infection, death, reanimation, more victims. By September 26th, the outbreak is undeniable. Zombies are openly attacking people in the streets. Raccoon City's police force, already understaffed and undertrained for anything like this, attempts to maintain order but quickly becomes overwhelmed. Barricades are established, but they don't hold. Civilians panic, causing traffic jams and chaos that make organized response impossible. The infection spreads faster than authorities can track it. Umbrella deploys the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, UBCS, into the city on September 26th. This is a mercenary unit consisting of operatives from various backgrounds, many with criminal records or military experience in morally compromised operations. Their official mission is humanitarian: evacuate civilians, provide medical assistance. The actual mission is more complex. Umbrella wants combat data on how their bioorganic weapons perform in urban environments against both infected civilians and trained military personnel attempting to contain them. The UBCS includes soldiers who genuinely believe they're on a rescue mission. Carlos Oliveira, a South American operative, thinks he's saving lives. Mikhail Victor, a veteran soldier, leads his squad with the assumption that they're doing necessary work. But Umbrella's corporate command has also deployed Umbrella Security Service operatives with orders to observe, collect data, and ensure that certain experimental bioweapons get field tested regardless of civilian casualties. One of those experimental weapons is Nemesis, designated as the Nemesis T-type, a bioorganic weapon specifically programmed to hunt and kill STARS members. Umbrella knows that surviving STARS members from the mansion incident possess evidence that could damage the corporation. Deploying Nemesis during the Raccoon outbreak serves two purposes: field testing the weapon and eliminating witnesses who know too much about Umbrella's crimes. September 28th. The city has descended into complete chaos. The police department station has become a fortress, with surviving officers trying to maintain some semblance of order while surrounded by thousands of infected. Civilians who made it to evacuation points find that many evacuation routes have been compromised or abandoned. Umbrella's UBCS is scattered throughout the city, some squads trying genuinely to help, others simply trying to survive. This is the environment that Leon Kennedy, a rookie cop showing up for his first day of work, walks into. This is the nightmare that Claire Redfield, searching for her brother Chris, drives directly toward, and this is the hell that Jill Valentine, one of the few surviving STARS members still in the city, has to escape while being hunted by a creature specifically designed to kill her. Three separate stories are about to unfold simultaneously in Raccoon City's final days. Each one will reveal different aspects of what Umbrella created, how containment failed, and what happens when corporate profit motives collide with biological horror. The outbreak has begun. The body count is rising, and the United States government is already discussing a solution that involves erasing the city entirely. But we're not there yet. First, we need to watch how ordinary people, a rookie cop, a college student, a veteran STARS member, survive when their city becomes a graveyard, and the only question is whether you'll make it out before the bombs fall. Chapter 4, 3 Days in Hell. Leon and Claire, September 29th. Leon Scott Kennedy approaches Raccoon City in the early morning of September 29th, unaware that he's driving toward an active outbreak zone. His police academy training prepared him for traffic stops and domestic disturbances, not bioweapons warfare. The radio has been reporting civil unrest and recommending that people avoid the area, but Leon assumes it's riots or maybe a chemical spill. Something manageable, something that requires police presence. He encounters Claire Redfield at a gas station just outside the city. She's on a motorcycle, searching for her brother Chris, who stopped responding to her messages weeks ago. Neither of them understands what they're about to walk into. They proceed toward Raccoon City together, and the first sign something is catastrophically wrong comes when they encounter a man stumbling in the road. Leon stops to help. The man turns and his face is wrong. Gray skin, clouded eyes, jaw working mechanically. Leon barely has time to process what he's seeing before the man attacks, biting and clawing with strength that seems impossible for someone who should be dying or dead. More figures emerge from the darkness, all showing the same characteristics. The creatures are everywhere, and they're not just attacking Leon and Claire. They're consuming a corpse in the middle of the road, tearing flesh from bone with single-minded hunger. Leon and Claire escape in a police cruiser, but the pursuit doesn't stop. The infected, zombies. Though neither Leon nor Claire has terminology for what they're witnessing yet, chase the vehicle through the city streets. The car crashes during the chaos, and Leon and Claire are separated by a massive fire caused by an exploding fuel truck. They agree to meet at the Raccoon Police Department and go their separate ways into the infected city. The Raccoon Police Department building is a fortress, a converted art museum with elaborate architecture that would be impressive in any other context. Now it's a tomb. The building is filled with zombies. officers who died defending it, civilians who sought shelter only to get trapped when the infection breached the barricades. Leon fights his way through former colleagues he never got to meet, people wearing RPD uniforms with their throats torn out and their bodies reanimated by a virus they didn't know existed. Claire experiences her own nightmare journey through the city streets, encountering not just zombies, but evidence of Umbrella's broader weapons program. Lickers, skinless, eyeless, bioorganic weapons with exposed brains and elongated tongues. Hunt through the police station using echolocation. These aren't accidental mutations, but deliberate creations, proof that Umbrella was engineering monsters for specific tactical applications. Both Leon and Claire encounter survivors who provide pieces of the larger picture. Ada Wong appears as a supposed FBI agent searching for her boyfriend, a researcher named John. Her story is partially true. She is looking for someone connected to the research, but Ada is actually a spy working for a rival organization, tasked with obtaining a sample of the G virus. She manipulates Leon's protective instincts, using his attraction to her and his desire to help as tools to advance her own mission. Claire finds a young girl named Sherry Birkin hiding in the police station. The child is William Birkin's daughter, abandoned by her parents, who were always more focused on their research than their family. Sherry has been surviving alone in the outbreak, avoiding zombies through luck and the knowledge of hiding places she learned from lonely hours spent at her parents' laboratory. Claire adopts a protective role toward Sherry, giving her a reason beyond pure survival to keep fighting. The police station itself becomes a puzzle box of survival. Ammunition is scarce, medical supplies are scattered and limited. Every room might contain zombies, lickers, or worse. The building's elaborate security system, designed to protect valuable art in its previous life, now creates barriers that make escape nearly impossible. Leon and Claire have to find keys, solve puzzles, and backtrack through areas they've already cleared as they search for a way out. Chief Brian Irons, the police department's highest-ranking officer, is revealed to be completely unhinged. He's been on Umbrella's payroll for years, taking bribes to suppress evidence of the company's illegal activities. When the outbreak began, instead of organizing evacuation or resistance, Irons descended into sadistic behavior, murdering the mayor's daughter, collecting taxidermied specimens, and treating the apocalypse as permission to indulge his worst impulses. Claire encounters Irons and witnesses his complete psychological breakdown before he's attacked and implanted with a G virus embryo, dying in agony as the creature gestates and erupts from his body. The sewers beneath Raccoon City become a critical location for both Leon and Claire. These tunnels connect the police station to Nest, the underground laboratory where William Birkin conducted his G virus research. The sewers are flooded with contaminated water and filled with giant alligators mutated by T-virus exposure. The journey through this area forces both protagonists to confront the scale of Umbrella's operations. The laboratory complex is enormous, employing hundreds of people, equipped with cutting-edge technology, and filled with evidence of human experimentation. William Birkin, now completely transformed by the G virus, becomes a recurring threat. The creature has lost all human cognition, operating purely on the G virus's drive to reproduce. It's searching for Sherry, drawn to her by genetic compatibility. The virus recognizes her as ideal host for implantation. Claire has to protect Sherry from a monster that used to be the child's father, a tragedy that neither of them fully processes amid the immediate terror. Ada's true agenda becomes clear during her time with Leon. She's been manipulating him to gain access to the G virus, and when she finally obtains a sample, she attempts to escape. But Umbrella's security systems and the mutated Birkin creature complicate her extraction. She falls from a catwalk during a confrontation, apparently dying while Leon watches helplessly. What Leon doesn't know is that Ada survives. her employers having technology that saves her from lethal injuries. She escapes Raccoon City with intelligence that will benefit her organization in future conflicts. Annette Birkin, William's wife and fellow researcher, appears throughout Leon and Claire's journey as a tragic figure. She's still trying to contain the G virus outbreak her husband created, still attempting to protect Umbrella's research even as the city collapses around her. She's mortally wounded during a confrontation with Ada, and, in her final moments, helps Claire understand how to save Sherry, who's been infected with a G virus embryo. Annette provides the antidote and dies knowing her daughter might survive, even if everything she worked for has been destroyed. The Nest facility's self-destruct system is activated, either by Leon or Claire or by automated protocols, triggered when containment is breached beyond recovery. The laboratory begins explosive disintegration while both protagonists are still inside. They have minutes to reach the surface before tons of concrete and steel collapse into the underground complex. The final confrontation with the mutated Birkin creature happens on a train platform as Leon, Claire, and Sherry attempt to escape. The G virus has pushed Birkin through multiple evolutionary stages. Each time they defeat him, he mutates further, becoming larger and more monstrous. The final form barely resembles anything human, just a mass of flesh and teeth and claws driven by viral imperative to destroy threats and reproduce. They manage to defeat this final form as the self-destruct sequence reaches its conclusion, the laboratory imploding behind them as they escape on a maintenance train. They emerge from the underground as the sun rises on September 30th, having survived roughly 24 hours of continuous horror. But Raccoon City isn't finished. The outbreak has consumed the entire metropolitan area. Thousands are dead or infected. The U.S. government has made a decision about containment that will erase the city from existence, and Jill Valentine, fighting her own battle against Nemesis across the same time frame, is about to discover that Umbrella's most advanced weapon is also the hardest to kill. Chapter 5: Outbreak. The Civilian's Perspective. The Raccoon City outbreak wasn't just experienced by trained operatives and government agents. It was experienced by bartenders, students, doctors, security guards, waitresses, ordinary people who woke up one morning in September and found themselves fighting for survival against creatures they didn't understand in a city that had become a mass grave. The outbreak incidents, documented in the games Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File Number 2, show what happened to civilians trapped in Raccoon City from September 26th through October 1st. These are the stories of people who didn't have military training or insider knowledge about Umbrella, who had to figure out survival through trial and error while the city collapsed around them. 8 individuals become the primary survivors whose stories are documented. Kevin Ryman, an RPD officer who was off duty when the outbreak began. Mark Wilkins, a security guard with military experience. Jim Chapman, a subway worker battling alcoholism and depression. George Hamilton, a doctor trying to maintain some medical response amid the chaos. David King, a plumber with a troubled past. Alyssa Ashcroft, a newspaper reporter who'd been investigating Umbrella before the outbreak. Cindy Lennox, a waitress with no combat experience. Yoko Suzuki, a university student studying computer science. These 8 cross paths at various points during the outbreak, sometimes working together, sometimes separating based on circumstance. Their stories show different aspects of the catastrophe that official reports and military perspectives miss. Jack's Bar, September 26th. The outbreak becomes undeniable for civilians at Jack's Bar, a small establishment where several of the survivors are present when infected individuals begin attacking in the streets outside. The bar's television is broadcasting increasingly desperate news reports, civil unrest, attacks, recommendations to stay indoors. Then the power fails. The broadcasts cut to static, and the groaning starts outside. Zombies break into the bar. The survivors, whoever is present in this scenario, have to fight using improvised weapons. Bottles, chairs, kitchen knives, whatever's available. The bartender is killed in the initial attack, reanimating minutes later and forcing the survivors to kill someone they knew personally. This pattern repeats throughout the outbreak. Every victim might return as a threat. Every corpse is potentially dangerous. The survivors barricade themselves briefly, but staying in one location is suicide. The infected are everywhere, and the bar offers no long-term safety. They make the decision to move, to try reaching evacuation points or finding somewhere more defensible. This decision marks the beginning of days of constant movement through an increasingly hostile urban environment. Raccoon City Underground, the subway system, becomes both escape route and death trap. Some survivors attempt to use the tunnels to reach other parts of the city, or to escape entirely. But the underground is flooding with contaminated water, and the darkness makes it nearly impossible to see threats approaching. Giant insects appear in the tunnels, results of T-virus exposure to arthropods, creating cockroaches and fleas the size of dogs. These creatures aren't as immediately deadly as zombies or lickers, but they're persistent, numerous, and capable of injecting infected saliva through bites. The survivors have to navigate flooded passages while avoiding both infected humans and mutated fauna. The subway scenarios also reveal the scale of panic that occurred in the first days. Abandoned luggage is everywhere. People who tried to evacuate but never made it. Corpses are piled in some areas where groups of infected apparently fed and then moved on. The evidence shows that thousands of people died trying to escape through the underground, overwhelming whatever security or police presence attempted to maintain order. The hospital should have been a refuge. Instead, it became one of the outbreak's worst locations. When infection began spreading, civilians naturally went to hospitals seeking treatment. Medical staff, not understanding they were dealing with a viral outbreak that reanimated corpses, treated incoming patients using standard protocols. Then those patients died and reanimated, attacking medical staff and other patients. The hospital's population density meant the infection spread explosively. Hundreds of people in close proximity, many already injured or ill, staff overwhelmed and unable to implement quarantine protocols they didn't know they needed. By the time the civilian survivors reach the hospital, zombies in patient gowns wander the halls. Medical equipment is scattered and bloody. Operating rooms are filled with partially dissected corpses, evidence that some doctors tried to study the infection even as it overwhelmed them. Leeches have infested the hospital. Not normal-sized leeches, but ones grown to horrific size through T-virus mutation. These creatures attach to hosts and drain blood rapidly, swarming together into a humanoid leech man that stalks the corridors and tears through anyone it catches. A researcher at the hospital had been working on treatments for T-virus infection, but by the time the survivors arrive, his work is unfinished and scattered, and the leech creature patrols the facility in his place. The hospital scenario forces survivors to navigate areas where medical supplies should be abundant but are actually scarce because everything useful has already been scavenged or destroyed. It also introduces ethical questions. Do you take medical supplies that might save someone else? Do you put infected but not yet turn patients out of their misery? Do you barricade doors, knowing you might be sealing uninfected people inside with infected? The university academic disaster. Raccoon University's science departments were conducting legitimate research on viral biology, unaware that Umbrella was using academic institutions for intelligence gathering and recruitment. When the outbreak hit, the university's laboratories became particularly dangerous because they contained viral samples, experimental cultures, and, in some cases, low-level T-virus derivatives that academic researchers thought were deactivated. The campus is filled with infected students and faculty. Dormitories are death traps. Students who barricaded themselves in rooms waiting for rescue died when no rescue came, then reanimated and now wait inside rooms that look secure from the outside. Laboratories contain mutated experiments, rats and primates used in research that were exposed to T-virus contamination. One scenario involves survivors trying to reach a communications facility to broadcast distress signals. The communications tower is on campus, and if they can reach it and get equipment operational, they might be able to call for help or warn others not to approach the city. The attempt reveals how thoroughly communication infrastructure has collapsed. Even when they get equipment working, there's no response. Either all receiving stations have been evacuated, or deliberately ignoring Raccoon City's signals, or the government has imposed a communication blackout to contain information about the outbreak. The police station, civilian entry. Some civilian survivors reach the Raccoon Police Department station, the same location Leon and Claire are fighting through. But the civilians' experience is different. They're not entering as trained operatives. They're entering as terrified refugees hoping to find protection. They discover that the police station is barely holding. The officers who are still alive are overwhelmed, running out of ammunition, and in some cases turning on each other as stress and infection take their toll. The station's armory has been breached and looted, meaning weapons are available but scattered. The holding cells contain infected individuals who were arrested in the early days of the outbreak before anyone understood what was happening. The police station scenarios show how institutional response collapsed. These officers wanted to help, wanted to maintain order, but they lacked information, resources, and coordination. When the outbreak exceeded their capacity to respond, the institution simply fragmented, every officer making individual survival decisions, the command structure dissolving as superiors died or fled. The zoo, natural horror Raccoon City, had a small zoo, and T-virus exposure turned it into a nightmare. Large mammals infected with T-virus don't all become zombies. Some experience more extreme mutations. The elephants became massive, aggressive creatures with enhanced strength. The big cats developed heightened predatory instincts and resistance to injury. The primates, already sharing significant genetic similarity with humans, underwent transformations that made them almost as dangerous as human zombies, but with greater agility and pack coordination. Survivors entering the zoo encounter animals that should have been safely contained, now roaming freely, hunting anything that moves. The scenario reveals how T-virus doesn't discriminate by species. Anything with sufficient biological complexity can be infected and transformed. This has implications for the global ecosystem if the virus ever spreads beyond localized outbreaks. Desperate times, the final days, by September 30th and into October 1st, the civilian survivors are simply trying to escape. Official evacuation points have been abandoned or overrun. Helicopter evacuations, promised by news reports, never materialized. The bridges out of the city have been destroyed, either by military action to contain the outbreak or by structural collapse from fire and fighting. The survivors' attempts to escape bring them into contact with umbrella forces and with Nikolai, the UBCS operative actively sabotaging evacuation efforts to maximize casualties for data collection. Some civilians die because Nikolai deliberately blocked escape routes or eliminated other survivors to ensure he's the only witness to certain events. The final scenarios take place as the missile strike approaches. Some survivors make it to helicopters or vehicles that get them outside the blast radius. Others are still in the city when the missiles hit. The scenarios don't all have happy endings. Some survivors make choices that doom themselves to save others. Some are simply in the wrong place when time runs out. Some escape with injuries or infections that will kill them after they've reached supposed safety. These civilian perspectives matter because they show that the Raccoon City outbreak wasn't just a military or corporate failure, it was a humanitarian catastrophe. The vast majority of the 100,000 casualties weren't trained operatives or scientists involved in bioweapons research. They were people whose only connection to Umbrella was living in a city where the corporation had facilities. They died because a corporation valued profit over safety, because governments prioritized containment over rescue, and because viruses don't care about innocence or guilt. The outbreak incidents demonstrate something crucial about bioweapons. Their primary victims are always civilians. Military personnel have training, equipment, and knowledge that gives them survival advantages. Ordinary people have none of those things. When containment fails, it's the unconnected, the uninformed, the unprepared who pay the highest price. And Raccoon City wasn't the only outbreak happening during this period. While the city burned, other Umbrella facilities were experiencing their own containment failures, proving that the T-virus problem was already global. Chapter 6: Sheena Island and the Biological Warfare of Abandoned Facilities. November 1998. Raccoon City has been destroyed for more than a month, but the world hasn't learned the lesson it should have. Umbrella Corporation is still operational, still maintaining research facilities, still conducting experiments that violate every ethical boundary. Sheena Island is a remote location in the Atlantic Ocean where Umbrella operates a chemical plant as cover for a bioweapons research and production facility. The island houses a small population, facility workers, security personnel, and their families. Most of the civilians have no idea what's actually being produced in the underground levels beneath the chemical plant. They think they work for a pharmaceutical company with classified government contracts, which is technically true but omits the detail that those contracts involve creating biological weapons. Vincent Goldman is the facility's commander, a cruel and ambitious executive who sees the position as a stepping stone to higher corporate rank. He's been conducting unauthorized experiments trying to develop his own improved versions of Umbrella's bioorganic weapons to prove his value to the company. His approach is reckless even by Umbrella's already compromised standards. He's cutting safety protocols, using human test subjects without proper containment measures, and prioritizing results over any consideration of risk. The outbreak on Sheena Island begins when Goldman deliberately releases T-virus into the civilian population. His reasoning is coldly pragmatic. He needs combat data on how bioorganic weapons perform against human targets, and the island's isolation makes it an ideal testing ground. He releases the virus, observes as the population transforms into zombies, then deploys various bioweapons to hunt them, while recording the results. Ark Thompson, a private investigator hired by Leon Kennedy to gather evidence against Umbrella, arrives on Sheena Island just as the outbreak begins. Leon, now working for a government anti-bioterror division after surviving Raccoon City, has been building a case against Umbrella and needs intelligence from inside the corporation. Ark's mission is to infiltrate the facility, gather documentation, and extract. Instead, Ark wakes up in a facility building with no memory of how he got there or what happened in the previous hours. This amnesia is the result of chemical exposure. Goldman used Umbrella's memory suppression drugs on Ark after capturing him, attempting to erase any intelligence he'd gathered. The drugs didn't fully work, leaving Ark disoriented but functional. The island is a nightmare. Zombies are everywhere. Not just Umbrella security, but civilians, families, children. Goldman didn't discriminate when he released the virus. Every infected person becomes another data point in his research. The island's layout forces Ark through residential areas where evidence of normal life, children's toys, family photographs, half-eaten dinners contrasts horrifically with the shambling corpses now occupying those spaces. Hunters are deployed throughout the facility as active threats, These bioorganic weapons weren't created by the Outbreak. They're intentional releases, part of Goldman's experiment. They hunt through both the facility and the outdoor areas, attacking zombies and any surviving humans indiscriminately. Ark has to avoid or fight them while searching for answers about what happened and how to escape. The facility's underground levels reveal the scope of Umbrella's weapons production. Assembly lines for producing tyrants, containment tanks holding various experimental creatures, storage areas with biological samples from dozens of different virus strains. Sheena Island wasn't just a research location, it was a manufacturing center capable of producing bioweapons in significant quantities for sale to military organizations globally. ARC discovers evidence that Goldman has been developing something called the Hypnos T-type, his own variation on the Tyrant bioweapon using modified T-virus. The creature is stronger and more controllable than previous Tyrants, representing genuine advancement in bioweapon technology. Goldman sees this creation as his ticket to power within Umbrella's hierarchy. Commander Vincent Goldman himself becomes a threat when ARC confronts him. Goldman is unrepentant about the massacre he orchestrated, viewing the deaths as necessary sacrifices for scientific progress. He's a true believer in Umbrella's mission, that bioweapons represent the future of warfare and corporate power, that ethical constraints are obstacles to be overcome, that human life has value only as data. When Goldman realizes ARC is going to expose what happened on Sheena Island, he tries to eliminate the investigator using the Hypnos T-type. The creature is unleashed in the facility's lower levels, hunting ARC with intelligence and persistence that exceeds earlier Tyrant models. The confrontation demonstrates how much Umbrella's bioweapon technology has advanced. Each iteration becomes more dangerous, more controllable, closer to the ideal of a biological weapon that can be deployed without turning on its creators. ARC defeats or escapes the Hypnos T-type and manages to activate the facility's self-destruct system. Goldman, cornered and facing exposure for his unauthorized experiments and mass murder, chooses to remain in the facility as it explodes. He dies believing he was serving Umbrella's greater purpose, another victim of the corporate culture that valued advancement over life. ARC escapes Sheena Island with evidence of what occurred, adding to the growing case against Umbrella Corporation. But the incident reveals a disturbing pattern. Even after Raccoon City's destruction, even with international attention beginning to focus on Umbrella's activities, the corporation continues operating. They have facilities worldwide, each conducting similar research, each a potential source of the next outbreak. The Sheena Island incident killed roughly 200 people, a small number compared to Raccoon City, but still a complete community erased by corporate ambition. The families who lived on that island, thinking they were supporting legitimate pharmaceutical research, died because an executive wanted to impress his superiors. Their deaths are barely noted in official records, classified as an industrial accident, another cover-up in Umbrella's long history of concealing their crimes. But while Umbrella is dealing with Sheena Island's exposure and Raccoon City's aftermath, other organizations are taking note of the bioweapons market's profitability. If Umbrella could create viruses this effective, could develop bioorganic weapons this powerful, then other corporations and governments want similar capabilities. The bioweapons black market is about to explode, and that means outbreaks are going to become more frequent, more widespread, and harder to contain. Because once the knowledge exists, once the techniques are documented, once samples are available for purchase, the nightmare can't be put back in its cage. And some outbreaks aren't even caused by corporations. Some are caused by individuals with access to viral samples and grudges that demand satisfaction through biological warfare. Chapter 7: Antarctica and the Ashford Legacy's Collapse. December 1998. Claire Redfield is searching for her brother Chris, who disappeared while investigating Umbrella's international facilities. Her search brings her to Paris, where she's captured during a raid on an Umbrella facility and taken prisoner. But Umbrella doesn't imprison her in a conventional facility. She's transported to Rockfort Island, a remote location in the Southern Ocean that houses both a military training facility and a prison complex. The island is owned by the Ashford family, one of Umbrella's founding bloodlines, and it's controlled by Alfred Ashford, descendant of Edward Ashford, one of the 3 men who discovered the progenitor virus. Claire is imprisoned in a cell with other captured individuals who attempted to expose or attack Umbrella. The security is thorough. The isolation is complete, and under normal circumstances, escape would be nearly impossible. Then the island is attacked. A rival organization seeking to acquire Umbrella's bioweapons launches a military assault on Rockfort Island. They're not trying to shut down Umbrella's operations or rescue prisoners. They want to steal viral samples and research data for their own bioweapons programs. The attack is sudden and overwhelming, with armed operatives storming the facility while airstrikes destroy defensive positions. During the chaos, Alfred Ashford makes a catastrophic decision. Rather than allow the attackers to steal Umbrella's research, he releases T-virus throughout the island. His logic is that the virus will kill or transform both the prisoners and the attacking forces, protecting the research through destruction of anyone who might steal it. The T-virus release turns Rockfort Island into another outbreak zone within hours. Prison guards become zombies. Attacking soldiers are infected mid-assault. The Umbrella military trainees stationed on the island transform into shambling corpses, still wearing their uniforms. The entire population of several hundred people becomes infected, creating another mass casualty event. Claire escapes her cell during the confusion and encounters Steve Burnside, a young prisoner whose family was killed by Umbrella after his father tried to sell company secrets. Steve is angry, traumatized, and armed with weapons he's scavenged from dead guards. He and Claire form an alliance based on mutual need for survival. Rockfort Island's layout reveals the Ashford family's obsession with their own legacy. The facility is filled with elaborate architecture, family portraits, and monuments to the Ashford name. Alfred has been living in the shadow of his ancestor Edward, trying to prove he's worthy of the family legacy through service to Umbrella. But Alfred is also deeply mentally ill, suffering from dissociative identity disorder stemming from childhood trauma. Alfred has a twin sister named Alexia, who was a genius virologist and who Alfred believes is still alive despite her apparent death years earlier. In reality, Alexia used herself as a test subject for a virus she created called T. Veronica, injecting herself and entering cryogenic suspension to allow the virus to integrate with her biology without killing her. Alfred has been maintaining the facility and protecting Alexia's body while waiting for her to wake. Alfred's dissociative disorder manifests as him sometimes believing he is Alexia. He dresses in her clothes, speaks in her voice, and acts out scenarios where his sister is still present and guiding him. This disorder, combined with his complete commitment to Umbrella and his family legacy, makes him unpredictable and dangerous. He pursues Claire and Steve through the facility, sometimes as Alfred threatening them with weapons, sometimes as Alexia manipulating them psychologically. The island contains various bioweapons beyond simple zombies, bandersnatches, mutated humanoids with elastic arms that can extend to grab victims from considerable distance, gulp worms, massive subterranean creatures created through T-virus experimentation, the albinoid, a mutated amphibian grown to enormous size. These creatures demonstrate that Rockfort Island wasn't just a training facility. It was an active testing ground for bioorganic weapons. Claire and Steve manage to locate a plane and attempt to escape the island, but Alfred sabotages their navigation system. They crash in Antarctica at another Ashford facility where Alexia's body is being kept in cryogenic storage. Chris Redfield, having learned of Claire's capture, arrives at Rockfort Island shortly after Claire and Steve escape. He finds the island already overrun, the outbreak complete, and Alfred's obsessive presence everywhere. Journals documenting his mental deterioration, surveillance footage showing his dissociative episodes, evidence of the experiments he conducted, trying to prove himself to a dead sister. Chris follows Claire's trail to Antarctica, where the situation escalates dramatically. Alexia Ashford wakes from her 15-year cryogenic sleep, the T. Veronica virus having successfully integrated with her biology. Unlike normal T virus infections that reduce hosts to mindless zombies, T. Veronica allows Alexia to retain her intelligence while gaining superhuman abilities, control over the virus, allowing her to infect others at will, fire-based powers stemming from altered metabolism, and physical strength far exceeding human norms. Alexia is not only intelligent but malevolent. She views herself as the pinnacle of human evolution, regards non-infected humans as inferior beings, worthy only of becoming her test subjects or slaves. She's been conscious during her cryogenic sleep, her mind active for 15 years, with nothing to do but plan and obsess. The isolation has amplified her already considerable sociopathy into something approaching godlike arrogance. The Antarctic facility contains even more horrifying experiments. The Ashford family had been conducting T. Veronica research for decades, testing the virus on various subjects. Bandersnatch creatures are everywhere, along with zombies frozen in ice who thaw as the facility's systems fail. The architecture is cold, sterile, industrial. None of the elaborate decoration of Rockfort Island, just efficient spaces designed for experimentation. Alfred appears again, having followed Chris to Antarctica in a final attempt to protect his sister. But he's no longer coherent, his mind completely fractured by his disorder and by witnessing Alexia's awakening. He attacks Chris but is killed, and his death barely registers with Alexia. She views her brother as disposable, another inferior being whose only value was maintaining her facility until she woke. Steve becomes infected with T. Veronica during the Antarctic incident, transformed into a monster by Alexia's deliberate release of the virus. He retains enough consciousness to recognize Claire and stop himself from killing her, dying human after being controlled by the virus. His death represents another tragedy of bioweapons. Even people who survive the initial outbreak can be destroyed by secondary exposures or intentional infections from intelligent virus hosts like Alexia. Chris confronts Alexia multiple times as she mutates through different forms, each one more monstrous than the last. T. Veronica grants her transformation abilities far beyond normal T virus mutations, allowing her to shift between human appearance and increasingly inhuman combat forms. The final confrontation involves Alexia as a massive insectoid creature, the last traces of her humanity consumed by the virus she thought she controlled. Chris defeats Alexia using experimental umbrella weapons, linear launcher devices designed to kill bioorganic weapons. The irony isn't lost on him that he's using Umbrella's own creations to destroy what Umbrella created. He and Claire escape Antarctica as the facility self-destructs, eliminating the last major repository of T. Veronica research. The Rockfort Island and Antarctica incidents together represent roughly 300 casualties. Everyone on the island when the outbreak began, the attacking forces, the research staff in Antarctica. But these incidents are significant beyond the body count, because they demonstrate that Umbrella's founding families are as dangerous as the viruses they created. The Ashfords' obsession with their legacy, their willingness to use their own bodies as test subjects, their complete disregard for human life, these traits were passed down through generations, creating a dynasty of bioweapons, creators who viewed mass murder as acceptable cost of scientific advancement. With Alexia dead and the Ashford facilities destroyed, one of Umbrella's three founding bloodlines has effectively ended, but the corporation continues, weakened but still operational, still maintaining facilities where research continues and where containment might fail at any moment. And while Umbrella slowly collapses under international pressure and legal challenges, former employees are scattering to the winds, taking expertise and sometimes viral samples to new employers. The bioweapons knowledge won't die with Umbrella. It will spread, metastasize, and lead to new horrors created by organizations that learned from Umbrella's mistakes. But we're between major timeline events now. The year 2000 approaches, and with it comes a brief respite, a few years where outbreaks are smaller, more contained, handled by government anti-bioterror forces before they explode into city-destroying catastrophes. This calm is deceptive. Behind the scenes, organizations are preparing for a new era of bioterror, and the viruses are evolving faster than anyone anticipated. When the outbreaks resume in earnest, they'll involve parasites instead of viruses, cults instead of corporations, and horrors that make the Raccoon City incident look contained by comparison. Chapter 8: The Ecliptic Express and the End of James Marcus. July 23, 1998. The Ecliptic Express is a luxury passenger train traveling through the Arklay Mountains, the same region where the Spencer Mansion outbreak is about to occur. The train is operated by Umbrella Corporation as part of their public-facing transportation business, completely separate from their bioweapons division, at least in theory. But tonight the train becomes a death trap. Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen are aboard the Ecliptic Express when the outbreak begins, though their presence is involuntary and complicated. Rebecca is the youngest STARS member on her way to investigate reports of strange incidents in the mountains when Bravo Team's helicopter crashes. Billy is a former Marine, convicted of mass murder and sentenced to execution, being transported by military police when their vehicle is attacked by infected creatures and he escapes. The two encounter each other on the train, which is already overrun with zombies and leeches, thousands of blood-sucking parasites that have grown to abnormal size and are swarming throughout the passenger cars. The source of both the zombies and the leeches is the same: the T-virus, released deliberately by someone with intimate knowledge of Umbrella's research. That someone is James Marcus, one of Umbrella's three founders, and he's supposed to be dead. Marcus was assassinated in 1988 on orders from Oswell Spencer, who viewed Marcus as competition and potential threat. Spencer sent operatives, including William Birkin and Albert Wesker, to murder Marcus and seize his research. They succeeded. Marcus was killed in his laboratory, his body left to rot while his work was stolen. But Marcus had been conducting experiments on himself using a combination of T-virus and leech DNA, the same research that led to the creation of the stabilized T-virus in the first place. His queen leech, a massive creature he'd been using for viral research, consumed Marcus's body after his death. The leech absorbed his DNA and, through mechanisms that aren't fully understood even by Umbrella's scientists, somehow absorbed his memories and consciousness as well. Over 15 years, the queen leech matured and developed the ability to split itself into a humanoid form that resembles a younger version of James Marcus. This entity believes it is Marcus, carries his memories and his grudges, and has spent years planning revenge against Umbrella for his murder. The Ecliptic Express outbreak is the opening move in that revenge. Rebecca and Billy navigate the train as it speeds through the mountains on a collision course with disaster. The passenger cars are filled with zombies. Not Umbrella employees, but ordinary passengers who were infected when the leeches were released. Elderly couples, business travelers, families, all transformed into shambling corpses. The leeches are everywhere, dropping from ceiling panels, crawling from under seats, swarming in masses that can strip flesh from bone in seconds. The train also contains eliminators, experimental bioorganic weapons that were being transported by Umbrella security. These creatures are results of applying T-virus to primates, creating highly aggressive humanoids with enhanced strength and climbing abilities. They were contained in a secure cargo car until the outbreak released them. Billy's presence complicates the situation. He's officially a convicted criminal who murdered 23 people during a mission in Africa. Military police are hunting him, and Rebecca should technically arrest him. But Billy maintains his innocence, claiming he was framed for atrocities actually committed by his commanding officer. Rebecca has to decide whether to trust a convicted mass murderer or face the nightmare alone. The train crashes, inevitable once the infected engineer lost control, and Rebecca and Billy escape into the Arklay Mountains. They discover an Umbrella facility hidden in the region, the same training facility and laboratory where James Marcus conducted his original research decades earlier. The facility has been abandoned since Marcus's assassination, left to decay, but it's recently been reactivated by the Marcus Leach entity. The facility is a monument to Marcus's obsession. His personal quarters are preserved like a shrine. His laboratory contains decades of research notes documenting his experiments with leeches and T-virus. Holding cells show evidence of human test subjects, students from the training facility who were used in experiments without their knowledge or consent. Marcus wasn't just a scientist. He was a predator who used his position as director to access vulnerable subjects. The Marcus entity appears throughout Rebecca and Billy's exploration, sometimes as the younger humanoid form, sometimes as the massive Queen Leech in its true appearance. The creature taunts them, explaining its history and its intentions. It's going to destroy Umbrella from within, release all their bioweapons research to the world, create outbreaks that will expose the corporation's crimes. Marcus, or the entity that believes it's Marcus, sees itself as an avenging angel, punishing those who betrayed it. But the entity is also insane, its human memories corrupted by existing within a leech's biology for 15 years. It doesn't just want to expose Umbrella. It wants to burn down human civilization, to unleash the T-virus globally, to transform the world into a testament to its genius and its suffering. Rebecca and Billy encounter Albert Wesker at the facility. Wesker, who appeared to die in the Spencer Mansion incident, has actually survived through viral enhancement and is now operating independently. He's returned to the Marcus facility to obtain research data for his own purposes. Wesker recognizes the threat the Marcus entity represents, not to humanity but to his own plans, and he provides Rebecca and Billy with information about how to destroy the Queen Leech. The final confrontation with the Marcus entity takes place as the facility begins self-destructing. The creature manifests in increasingly monstrous forms, humanoid Marcus transforming into masses of leeches, those leeches combining into giant composite creatures. The Queen Leech revealing its true size and power. The battle demonstrates how unstable bioorganic weapons become when they retain intelligence and memory. The Marcus entity can adapt, strategize, and modify its form in response to threats. Rebecca and Billy destroy the Marcus entity using experimental weapons found in the facility, and they escape as explosions consume the complex. Outside, as the sun rises on July 24th, Rebecca makes a decision that defines her character. She lies about Billy's fate, reporting that he died in the facility. This gives Billy a chance to disappear, to start over, to escape the execution that awaited him for crimes he insists he didn't commit. Billy vanishes into the wilderness, and Rebecca continues to the Spencer mansion, where the events of the original Resident Evil are about to unfold. The Marcus incident is contained, only a few dozen casualties, mostly passengers on the train, nothing approaching the scale of Raccoon City. But the incident proves that Umbrella's past continues to haunt them, that even dead founders can return to destroy what they built, and that the T-virus has properties that still aren't fully understood. The Marcus entity managed to transfer consciousness or memories across species and biological forms. If that's possible, if the T-virus can preserve and transmit complex information like memory and personality, then every outbreak carries possibilities even more disturbing than zombies and monsters. The virus isn't just reanimating corpses, it's potentially creating new forms of existence that blur the line between living and dead, between original and copy, between human and something else entirely. But there's no time to study these implications because Umbrella Corporation is finally collapsing under the weight of its crimes. And the collapse is going to be messier and deadlier than anyone anticipated. Chapter 9: Umbrella's End and the Russian Outbreak. February 2003. While Umbrella is collapsing under legal and financial pressure, the corporation still attempts to salvage its assets. But Umbrella doesn't go quietly. The corporation still maintains hidden facilities in Russia, owned through shell companies, and protected by corrupt officials. One of these facilities, located in the Caucasus region, houses some of Umbrella's most advanced research: experimental bioweapons that were never deployed, viral variants that were deemed too unstable even for Umbrella's standards, and archival data documenting the corporation's complete bioweapons program. The Russian government wants this research. They also want to eliminate evidence of their complicity with Umbrella before international investigators discover the extent of Russian Umbrella cooperation. So they dispatch special forces to the facility with orders to secure the data and sterilize the location. The operation goes wrong immediately. The Russian facility was conducting active research when the government forces arrived, and the researchers, realizing they're about to be arrested or killed, trigger a containment breach. T-virus is released throughout the facility. The soldiers find themselves fighting not just to secure data but to survive against zombies, bioorganic weapons, and experimental creatures that were kept in containment specifically because they were too dangerous to deploy. This outbreak is significant not for its size. The facility houses only about 200 people, and most die in the initial breach, but for what it represents. Even as Umbrella officially collapses, its facilities continue operating, its research continues spreading, and new outbreaks keep occurring. The corporation can be destroyed, but the knowledge it created and the viruses it engineered will persist. The Russian forces managed to contain the outbreak through overwhelming firepower and tactical bombing, destroying the facility and everyone in it. But they do secure some research data, and that data enters Russian bioweapons programs. Other nations conduct similar raids on Umbrella facilities in their territories, and while some successfully eliminate the threat, others quietly seize the research for their own military applications. Umbrella Corporation is officially dissolved in 2004 after final legal rulings find the company guilty of multiple criminal violations and strip its corporate charter. The pharmaceutical division is sold off to legitimate companies. The assets are liquidated. The executives who can be found are prosecuted, though many have fled to nations without extradition treaties. Oswell Spencer, Umbrella's true founder and architect, goes into hiding. He has resources, connections, and contingency plans developed over decades. While his corporation dies, he survives, protected by loyalists and wealth hidden in accounts the authorities can't touch. But Spencer's survival won't last. His former employees, Albert Wesker in particular, have their own plans, and those plans require Spencer's death. Chapter 10: Spencer's Estate and the Final Reckoning. 2006. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine have been working for the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, BSAA, an international organization created specifically to respond to bioweapons incidents in the post-Umbrella world. They've been hunting Oswell Spencer for years, determined to bring Umbrella's founder to justice for the Raccoon City massacre and countless other crimes. Intelligence finally locates Spencer at an estate in Europe, a massive mansion complex where he's been living in seclusion with minimal security. Chris and Jill assault the estate expecting heavy resistance from bioweapons and security forces. They find something worse: Albert Wesker. Wesker has reached Spencer's estate first, having his own agenda with the man who shaped his life. Wesker was part of a program called the Wesker Project, an umbrella initiative that took children with specific genetic profiles and groomed them to become future leaders for Spencer's vision of a evolved humanity. Albert was the most successful subject, the one who survived viral enhancement and became something superhuman. But Wesker has learned the truth about his origins, about how he was manufactured rather than chosen, and he's come to kill the man who created him. When Chris and Jill arrive, they find Spencer already dead, killed moments earlier by Wesker. The confrontation between Wesker and the BSAA operatives is brutally one-sided. Wesker has enhanced speed, strength, and reflexes that make him effectively superhuman. He's faster than Chris can track, strong enough to throw humans through walls, and arrogant enough to toy with opponents who have no chance of defeating him. He views Chris and Jill as insects, barely worthy of his attention. Jill tackles Wesker through a window as he's about to kill Chris, sacrificing herself to save her partner. Both Wesker and Jill fall through the window toward rocky terrain far below. Chris watches helplessly as Jill disappears, apparently killed by the fall. The Spencer estate incident closes a chapter in Resident Evil's history. Spencer is dead, killed by his own creation. Jill is apparently dead, lost saving her partner. Umbrella Corporation is officially dismantled. The era that began with 3 men discovering a flower in a West African cave has ended with one of those men murdered by the superhuman monster his research created. But this ending is also a beginning. Spencer's death doesn't eliminate bioweapons, it decentralizes them. Without Umbrella's monopoly, bioweapons research spreads to dozens of organizations, governments, and individual actors. The knowledge can't be erased, the viruses can't be recalled, and new threats are already emerging, threats that have nothing to do with Umbrella or the T-virus. Some of those threats are ancient, parasites that have existed for centuries, waiting for someone to rediscover them and recognize their potential as weapons. You've been listening for a while now, and we've covered the Umbrella era, from the corporation's founding through its destruction, from the first outbreaks through Raccoon City's annihilation. But here's something most people don't realize. Umbrella's collapse didn't end bioterror. It just changed who was creating the outbreaks. We're about to enter a new phase of horror, where the threats aren't corporate experiments gone wrong, but deliberate acts of terrorism using biological weapons, where ancient parasites replace modern viruses, where cults and terrorists and rogue nations all want their own version of the T-virus, their own tyrants, their own methods of turning human bodies into weapons. The next outbreaks are more targeted, more intentional, and somehow even more cruel than what Umbrella created, because at least with Umbrella, there was the pretense of scientific research, the excuse of Chapter 11: Spain and Las Plagas. 2004. A cult called Los Illuminados operates in a remote region of rural Spain, centered around a village that's been isolated from modern society for generations. The cult is led by Osmond Sadler, a charismatic religious leader who's recently assumed control after the previous cult leaders died under suspicious circumstances. Sadler has discovered something that was buried beneath the village centuries ago: parasites called Las Plagas, sealed underground by the Spanish government when they realized how dangerous these organisms were. Las Plagas are not viruses. They're multicellular parasites that burrow into human hosts, usually entering through the mouth or other orifices, and attach to the central nervous system. Once attached, the parasite takes control of the host's motor functions while leaving cognitive abilities largely intact. This creates something fundamentally different from T-virus zombies. Plagas hosts, called ganados, retain intelligence, speech, and the ability to use tools and weapons. They can coordinate attacks, set traps, and follow complex orders. But their wills are suppressed by the parasite, making them absolutely obedient to the cult's commands. They're not mindless monsters. They're enslaved humans, their bodies hijacked by organisms that turn them into living puppets. Sadler has infected the entire village population with Las Plagas. Farmers, shopkeepers, elderly residents, children, everyone in the community has been implanted with parasites. From the outside, the village might appear normal, people still performing daily activities, but they're all under Sadler's control. An army of thousands ready to attack anyone he designates as an enemy. The cult's plan extends beyond controlling one village. Sadler has kidnapped Ashley Graham, daughter of the U.S. president, and implanted her with a Plagas parasite. His intention is to return Ashley to America, where the parasite will mature, take control, and turn the president's daughter into a puppet under Sadler's command. Through Ashley, Sadler believes he can gain access to the highest levels of American government, implant more parasites, and gradually convert global leadership to his control. This plan brings Leon Kennedy to Spain. Leon, now a federal agent working directly under the president, is assigned to rescue Ashley. He arrives in the Spanish village expecting a standard hostage situation, local bandits, maybe organized crime, something he can handle with training and firearms. Instead, he encounters villagers who attack with farming implements, who shrug off gunshot wounds that should be fatal, who coordinate their attacks with disturbing intelligence. They speak Spanish, warn each other about his position, flank and surround him using tactics that zombies would never employ. When he kills them, their bodies sometimes split open to reveal the Plagas parasites, writhing tentacled creatures that emerge from necks or torsos, transforming the host into something even more monstrous. Leon is assisted by Luis Serra, a researcher who formerly worked for Umbrella and who was recruited by Sadler to study Las Plagas. Luis has realized the horror of what he's helping create and is trying to redeem himself by developing a cure for the parasites. His knowledge of both Umbrella's viral research and Los Illuminados' parasite research makes him invaluable. Though his past employment with Umbrella creates trust issues, the village and surrounding region reveal the scope of Sadler's operation. The cult has converted a medieval castle into their headquarters. They've excavated massive, underground caverns where Plagas parasites breed in the thousands. They've created specialized variants. Colmillos are dogs infected with Plagas, becoming fast and resilient attack animals. Del Lago is a massive, aquatic creature infected with a gigantic Plagas variant, transformed into a lake monster. El Gigante are humans who've undergone extreme mutation from Plagas infection, growing to giant size with proportional strength increases. The cult's leadership includes 2 individuals enhanced with specialized Plagas variants, Ramon Salazar is a Castellan who appears to be a young man, but is actually middle-aged, his growth stunted by genetic conditions. He's fanatically loyal to Sadler and commands the castle operations. Vitores Mendez is the village chief, a massive man who can transform into a centipede-like creature, with his Plagas parasite fully manifested. Both represent what Plagas parasites can do to human bodies when allowed to grow beyond normal constraints. Leon locates Ashley in the castle and begins extraction, but both he and Ashley have been infected with Plagas parasites. They're in the early stages of infection, not yet controlled, but experiencing symptoms. Black veins appearing on their skin, moments of disorientation where the parasites attempt to assert influence, the knowledge that they're on a countdown until the parasites mature and their free will is eliminated. Luis provides Leon with suppressants that slow the parasite's growth, buying time to find a permanent cure. But Luis is killed by Sadler before he can complete his research, dying while passing information to Leon about a facility where the parasites can be removed. The facility is located on an isolated island controlled by Los Iluminados, where Sadler has been conducting military-grade weapons research using Plagas. The island houses laboratories, training facilities, and a private army of ganados equipped with military weapons and body armor. This isn't a rural cult hiding in the mountains. This is a bioweapons development program that rivals anything Umbrella created, funded by selling Plagas-infected soldiers to terrorist organizations and rogue nations. The island reveals how quickly bioweapons proliferate once the knowledge exists. Sadler learned about Umbrella's work, understood the military applications of biological enhancement, and adapted the ancient Plagas parasites to create his own version of bioorganic weapons. He's selling infected soldiers, ganados who follow orders perfectly, feel no fear, and fight until physically destroyed, to anyone with sufficient funding. Leon encounters Ada Wong on the island. Ada has been present throughout his mission, sometimes helping and sometimes pursuing her own objectives. She's working for a rival organization seeking to acquire Plagas samples to compete in the bioweapons black market. Her agenda conflicts with Leon's rescue mission, but she provides assistance at critical moments, showing that her mercenary loyalty has limits when Leon's life is at stake. The island also contains regenerators and Iron Maidens, human hosts with Plagas parasites that grant rapid healing. These creatures can regenerate from massive damage, regrowing lost limbs and healing gunshot wounds in seconds. They're nearly impossible to kill without specialized equipment that can target the parasites themselves rather than the host body. They represent Plagas's potential to create soldiers who are functionally immortal in combat situations. Leon and Ashley reach the facility where Luis was developing his Plagas removal device. The process is successful. Specialized radiation targets and kills the parasites without destroying the hosts. Both Leon and Ashley are freed from infection, though the experience leaves them traumatized by the knowledge of what the parasites were doing inside their bodies. Osmond Sadler confronts Leon for a final battle, having transformed himself into a massive creature by deliberately accelerating his Plagas growth. The transformation turns him into a spider-like entity with multiple appendages, exposed organs, and the ability to manipulate other ganados through some form of parasitic communication. He's no longer human. He's become the ultimate expression of what Las Plagas can do to human biology when allowed to completely overtake the host. Leon defeats Sadler with assistance from Ada, who provides a specialized rocket launcher specifically designed to destroy Plagas-infected creatures. Sadler's death breaks the cult's control structure. The ganados throughout the region lose coordination, their parasites becoming confused without the central command presence. This reveals that Las Plagas creates a hive mind structure where a dominant parasite can influence others, and killing that dominant host disrupts the entire network. Ada escapes with Plaga's samples, ensuring that the parasites will continue to proliferate on the bioweapons black market. Leon and Ashley escape on a jet ski as the island explodes behind them, whether from self-destruct systems or from military airstrikes. The facility is eliminated along with most evidence of Los Illuminados' operations. The Spanish incident officially counts approximately 3,000 casualties, the entire village population, the cult members throughout the region, and the mercenaries stationed on the island. But the incident's significance extends beyond the body count. Las Plagas represents a new category of bioweapon, one that preserves intelligence while eliminating free will, that creates controllable soldiers rather than mindless zombies, that has applications for everything from terrorism to political assassination to military conquest. And the parasite is loose. Ada's employers have samples. Other intelligence agencies likely obtained specimens from the island before it was destroyed. Terrorist organizations are already bidding for access to Plaga's infected soldiers. The nightmare that Umbrella began with the T-virus continues in new forms, with new actors, spreading across the globe faster than any containment effort can track. Leon returns to America with Ashley. Mission accomplished, but knowing that what he witnessed in Spain will replicate elsewhere. The president's daughter is safe, but countless other people will be infected with Las Plagas or its derivatives in the coming years. The bioweapons era didn't end with Umbrella, it metastasized, and some outbreaks are already happening. Incidents that don't make international news because they occur in regions where governments can suppress information, or where the chaos is blamed on conventional terrorism rather than biological weapons. Chapter 12, Terra Grigia Panic and Veltro's Abyss. 2004, the same year's the Spanish incident. The floating city of Terra Grigia represents humanity's technological optimism, an artificial city built in the Mediterranean, powered by solar energy, designed as a prototype for sustainable urban development. The city houses approximately 5,000 residents and countless tourists, all living in a marvel of engineering that was supposed to prove humanity could build better cities through advanced technology. Then Veltro, a bioterrorist organization, attacks the city using a new biological weapon called the T-Abyss virus. T-Abyss is a variant of the original T-virus, modified to work specifically in aquatic environments. Standard T-virus struggled in marine conditions. The virus degraded in saltwater and produced unreliable mutations in aquatic hosts. T-Abyss solves these problems, creating a virus that spreads through water and transforms aquatic life into aggressive bioorganic weapons. Veltro releases T-Abyss into Terra Grigia's water systems. The virus spreads through the city's elaborate canal network, the desalination plants, the decorative fountains and pools. Within hours, the infection reaches the human population, but T-Abyss creates different mutations than standard T-virus. The infected don't just become zombies, they undergo transformations that make them amphibious, covered in barnacle-like growths, capable of functioning both above and below water. The transformed humans, called ooze, retain minimal motor function and hunting instincts. They're slower than typical zombies, but more resilient, their bodies saturated with water and viral biomass that makes them difficult to kill. And they're everywhere, in the streets, in buildings, swimming through the canals, emerging from the Mediterranean to attack evacuation boats. The Federal Bioterrorism Commission, FBC, responds to the attack. This is a controversial organization, a government agency with military-grade weapons and authority to respond to bioterror incidents with extreme force. They're less interested in rescuing civilians than in containing the outbreak and eliminating Veltro's presence. Parker Luciani and Jessica Sharawat are FBC agents deployed to Terra Grigia during the outbreak. They witness the panic as thousands of civilians attempt to evacuate while ooze swarm through the streets. The floating city's design, brilliant under normal circumstances, becomes a death trap. The bridges and causeways create bottlenecks where crowds are trapped and infected. The solar power systems fail, plunging sections of the city into darkness. The desalination plants pump contaminated water throughout the infrastructure. Terra Grigia also faces attacks from mutated marine life. Fish infected with T-abyss grow to enormous size and attack boats. Dolphins transformed by the virus become aggressive predators. The virus is spreading through the Mediterranean, threatening to contaminate the entire sea if not contained. The FBC's solution is brutal. They deploy a satellite weapon called Regia Solis, essentially a focused solar beam that can incinerate entire city blocks. They use this weapon to burn Terra Grigia, sterilizing the outbreak through overwhelming fire. Thousands of civilians still in the city are killed by the same weapon that was supposed to protect them. The FBC declares the response a success, but survivors and critics recognize it as mass murder disguised as containment. Veltro claims responsibility for the attack, presenting themselves as eco-terrorists protesting humanity's environmental destruction. They argue that creating artificial cities in the ocean represents human arrogance that needed correction. The bioterror attack was meant to demonstrate that nature, enhanced through viral weaponry, could destroy human technological achievements. But Veltro's actual motivations are murkier. The organization has connections to pharmaceutical companies, possibly including remnants of Umbrella's research division. The attack on Terra Grigia benefits multiple parties. It justifies increased funding for anti-bioterror organizations like the FBC. It demonstrates T-Abyss's effectiveness as a weapon to potential buyers, and it eliminates thousands of witnesses to whatever was actually happening in the floating city. 2005. The Terra Grigia incident has been officially closed, the city abandoned and quarantined. But the BSAA, competing with the FBC for authority in anti-bioterror operations, receives intelligence that Veltro might still be active, operating from a cruise ship called the Queen Zenobia in the Mediterranean. Jill Valentine and Parker Luciani, now working for BSAA, are dispatched to investigate the Queen Zenobia in 2005. Before Jill's 2006 confrontation with Wesker at Spencer's estate and long before her later captivity, the Queen Zenobia is a ghost ship drifting in the Mediterranean with no crew visible. When Jill and Parker board, they find the vessel infested with ooze, the same creatures from Terra Grigia. The ship's interior is flooded, water contaminated with T-Abyss pouring through corridor sections. The ooze hunt through the darkness, and mutated sea creatures have infiltrated through breached hull sections. The ship contains evidence of Veltro's operations, but it also contains evidence of something more disturbing. The Terra Grigia attack might have been a false flag operation. Documents suggest that the FBC's director, Morgan Lansdale, had knowledge of the attack before it occurred and allowed it to happen to justify his organization's expanded powers and funding. Veltro might have been manipulated or even created by the same government agencies supposedly fighting them. Chris Redfield and Jessica Sharawat are deployed to a sister ship, the Queen Semiramis, investigating parallel leads. Both ships were used by Veltro for T-Abyss research and weapon development. The ships contained laboratories where the virus was refined, holding tanks where infected creatures were kept, and missile systems armed with T-Abyss warheads ready to be deployed against coastal cities. The truth emerges gradually. Morgan Lansdale orchestrated the Terra Grigia panic to position himself as humanity's defender against bioterror. He worked with Veltro's leadership, providing them with viral samples and tactical support, then used the attack he helped create to justify burning the city and expanding his organization's authority. Thousands died not because of terrorist action, but because of government conspiracy to manufacture threats that required government solutions. Veltro's leader, Jack Norman, was betrayed by Lansdale after serving his purpose. Norman infected himself with T-Abyss in a desperate attempt to gain power, transforming into a massive, aquatic creature that retains human intelligence, but is driven by viral imperative to spread the infection. His final battle with BSAA operatives is tragic. He's a terrorist who's become a victim of his own weapons, betrayed by the people he worked with, transformed into a monster that can't die but also can't be saved. The Queen Zenobia is destroyed to prevent T-Abyss samples from being recovered by other bioterror organizations. Lansdale is arrested after the conspiracy is exposed, though many doubt he'll face actual consequences given his connections and the classified nature of much of the evidence. The FBC is dissolved, its authority transferred to the BSAA, which becomes the primary international anti-bioterror force. The Terra Grigia incident killed roughly 5,000 people in the initial attack and hundreds more during the Queen Zenobia investigation. But the incident's legacy extends beyond casualties. It proves that governments can be just as dangerous as terrorists when they're willing to use bioweapons, that false flag operations using biological weapons are possible, and that the line between protection and mass murder depends entirely on who's controlling the narrative. T-Abyss samples survived despite efforts at containment. The virus is now part of the bioweapons black market, available to anyone with sufficient funding. Coastal cities worldwide face potential attacks from a virus specifically designed to exploit their proximity to water. And the Mediterranean contamination, while officially contained, left genetic markers in marine life that might persist for generations. But before we continue forward in the timeline, we need to address an outbreak that was happening simultaneously with these events. An outbreak that wasn't grand scale or international, but was perhaps more personally horrifying than anything Umbrella ever created. Because sometimes the worst outbreaks aren't in cities or military facilities. Sometimes they're in family homes, where people you love become test subjects, and every meal might be your last. Chapter 13. The Baker House and Eveline's Family. 2017. Rural Louisiana, Dulvey Parish. The Baker family, Jack, Marguerite, their son Lucas, and their daughter Zoe, live in a plantation house that's been in their family for generations. They're isolated, living in the bayou with minimal contact with neighbors, self-sufficient in ways that people in modern cities have forgotten. Then Mia Winters arrives, and everything changes. Mia isn't arriving voluntarily. She's being transported in a cargo ship carrying a bioweapon called Eveline, a genetically engineered human designed to control other humans through infection with a mutagenic fungus. Mia works for a bioweapons corporation, not Umbrella, but one of the many organizations that emerged from Umbrella's ruins, and her job was transporting Eveline to a buyer. But Eveline escaped containment on the ship. The bioweapon is designed to look like a 10-year-old girl, a deliberate choice to make people lower their guard. Eveline's infection vector is a mutagenic mold that she can control and spread, and her psychological programming makes her desperate to create a family, people she can infect and control, forcing them to love her and never leave her. The ship wrecks in the Gulf of Mexico near the Baker property. Mia and Eveline wash ashore. The Baker family, being good people, take them in, offering shelter and medical attention to what appear to be survivors who need help. Eveline infects them within days. The mold spreads through their bodies, altering their biology and placing them under Eveline's control. The Bakers become her family, not by choice but by infection, their wills suppressed by a bioweapon that looks like a child and has the emotional needs of one. Over the next 3 years, the Baker house becomes a nightmare. Jack, Marguerite and Lucas are completely controlled by Eveline, though Lucas eventually develops partial resistance and begins conducting his own experiments. The family abducts people who wander too close to their property, infecting them with the mold or using them as food. The plantation house deteriorates. Marguerite's obsessive behavior creates insect infestations. Jack's violence damages the structure. The mold itself grows through walls and floors like a cancer. Zoe Baker retains enough free will to recognize what's happening. She's infected. The mold is in her body. But she's resisting Eveline's control through sheer stubborn determination. She can't escape because Eveline's control extends throughout the property, but she can observe, plan, and wait for an opportunity. Ethan Winters receives a message from his wife Mia 3 years after she disappeared during what he thought was a work trip. The message says she's in Louisiana and needs help. Ethan, an ordinary civilian with no combat training or knowledge of bioweapons, drives to the Baker property to find his wife. He discovers a house of horrors. Mia attacks him with a knife, her personality shifting between lucid recognition and violent insanity as Eveline's control fluctuates. During the struggle, Mia severs Ethan's left hand with a chainsaw. Ethan watches his hand fall to the floor, watches blood pour from the stump, and should by all rights bleed to death in minutes. Instead, he finds the hand can be reattached using first aid medicine he finds in the house. This is the first indication that something is wrong with Ethan himself, that his biology isn't responding to injury the way normal human biology should. The truth? That Ethan was infected with the mold during his first encounter with Mia and is already in early stages of transformation won't become clear until much later. Jack Baker becomes Ethan's primary tormentor. Jack is a massive man who's been enhanced by the mold, gaining regenerative abilities that make him nearly impossible to kill. He stalks Ethan through the Baker house, sometimes running, sometimes crawling through tight spaces, always speaking in friendly tones. Even while trying to murder his guest, Jack's behavior is disturbing because he's aware of what he's doing but can't stop. The mold controls his actions while leaving his consciousness intact, making him a prisoner in his own body, forced to watch himself commit atrocities. The Baker house is structurally impossible. Rooms that shouldn't connect do. Passages appear and disappear. The layout shifts in ways that suggest the mold is actively altering the architecture. The house is alive with Eveline's infection, the walls literally growing with fungal matter that responds to her emotional state. It's not metaphorical that the house is hostile. It's literally hostile. A bioorganic structure that Eveline has fused with. Marguerite Baker has fused with the mold to an even greater extent. She commands insects, wasps, and other species that have been infected with the fungus and follow her orders. She's created a nest in the old house section, an area so infested with mold and insects that the air itself is toxic. Her boss fight involves her transforming into an insectoid creature, her human form splitting open to reveal the mold's true integration with her biology. Lucas Baker is the most disturbing family member because he's regained free will but chosen to continue the horror. A rival organization provided him with a serum that negates Eveline's control, and instead of escaping or helping victims, Lucas has been conducting elaborate torture games on the people his family abducts. He set up rooms filled with deadly traps, forcing victims to solve puzzles under time pressure, with death as the penalty for failure. Lucas is a sadist who was already disturbed before the infection and used the mold as an excuse to indulge his worst impulses. Zoe helps Ethan navigate the property, communicating through phone calls and providing information about the family's weak points. She's maintained her humanity despite years of infection, but she's weakening. The mold is slowly eroding her resistance, and she knows that eventually she'll become like the others. Ethan discovers that Eveline is rapidly aging. The bioweapon was designed with a limited lifespan. Her cells are deteriorating, causing her to age at an accelerated rate. The 10-year-old girl is now physically appearing as an elderly woman, her control over the mold weakening as her biology fails. This explains the Baker's recent desperation. Their controller is dying, and when Eveline dies, the mold might kill them all or leave them as mindless shells. Mia's role becomes clearer. She wasn't just transporting Eveline, but was assigned as the bioweapons handler, a caretaker meant to keep the weapon stable during transport. She's been infected longer than the Bakers, her personality more completely subsumed by Eveline's control. Her lucid moments are brief breaks in the conditioning, windows where the real Mia can surface before being dragged back under. Ethan locates a serum that can kill Eveline, synthesized from her own genetic material by researchers who built fail-safes into their creation. He has to choose between curing Mia or curing Zoe. There's only enough serum for one person. The choice has moral weight. Save his wife who's committed atrocities under mind control, or save the innocent girl who's been fighting the infection for years. Regardless of choice, Eveline confronts Ethan in a final battle. She's no longer appears as a child or elderly woman. The mold has transformed her into a massive fungal growth, a blob of mutated tissue that's consumed most of the basement level. She's lost coherent thought, operating on pure biological imperative to spread and consume. The fight is less combat than demolition, destroying enough of the mold structure that Eveline's consciousness can no longer function. Chris Redfield arrives via helicopter as the Baker property burns, bringing military support and a complete bioweapon cleanup crew. He's working for an organization called Blue Umbrella, a supposedly reformed version of the original corporation, now claiming to use their bioweapons expertise to fight bioterror rather than create it. The rebranding is controversial, and Chris's involvement with a company bearing the Umbrella name disturbs everyone who remembers what the original corporation created. The Baker House incident has a relatively low body count, perhaps 50 people over 3 years, abducted travelers and locals who wandered too close. But the incident reveals several disturbing developments in bioweapons technology. Eveline represents a new category: bioweapons designed for psychological warfare and covert infiltration rather than direct combat. An enemy nation infected with Eveline's mold would collapse from within as leaders and officials became unknowing puppets. The weapon is perfect for political assassination, corporate espionage, or creating sleeper agents who don't know they're being controlled. The mold infection also demonstrates regenerative properties that exceed anything T-virus created. Ethan survives injuries that should be fatal: multiple dismemberments, being impaled through the chest, massive blood loss. The mold keeps him alive and functional, regenerating tissue faster than damage accumulates. This regeneration makes mold-infected individuals nearly impossible to kill through conventional means, requiring specialized toxins or complete biological breakdown, and the infection is subtle. Unlike T-virus, which creates obvious symptoms and monstrous appearances, mold infection can remain hidden for years. Infected individuals can function normally in society, passing medical examinations, displaying no external signs of contamination. This makes containment nearly impossible. There's no way to identify who's infected until the controller activates them. The Baker incident is officially classified as a gas leak and structural fire. Neighbors are told the family died in an accident. The land is quarantined and purchased by a shell company that ensures no one investigates further. The survivors, Ethan, Mia, and potentially Zoe, depending on earlier choices, are taken into protective custody and debriefed about their experience. But the bioweapon that created Eveline, the mold and the technology behind it, that's not contained. Multiple organizations have been developing similar weapons. The corporation that created Eveline continues operating, and the mold itself might have contaminated the bayou ecosystem in ways that won't become apparent for years. We're roughly halfway through the complete Resident Evil Outbreak timeline now. We've covered Umbrella's rise and fall, the transition from corporate bioweapons programs to international bioterrorism, and the emergence of new infections beyond the T-virus. The scale has shifted from isolated incidents to global threats, from corporate conspiracies to government-sponsored bioweapons programs. What comes next is where everything escalates beyond containment. We're approaching outbreaks that threaten continents rather than cities, weapons that target the entire human species rather than specific populations, and the confrontation with Albert Wesker, the superhuman monster who believes he's the next stage of human evolution and plans to force that evolution on everyone whether they want it or not. The African outbreak in Kijuju is where bioweapons stop being corporate products and start being tools of genocide. And it's where Chris Redfield finally settles accounts with the man who's haunted him since the Spencer Mansion. Chapter 14, Kijuju and Ouroboros, 2009. The African nation where this outbreak occurs remains partially classified in official reports, but the city at the center is called Kijuju, a region with a complicated history of colonial exploitation, political instability, and exactly the kind of vulnerable population that bioweapons developers target when they need test subjects no one will miss. Albert Wesker has spent the years since Spencer's death building toward his ultimate vision. He's not just developing bioweapons, he's preparing to force human evolution on a global scale. Wesker obtained samples of the progenitor virus, studied Umbrella's complete research archives, and concluded that Spencer's vision was correct, but the execution was flawed. Humanity does need to evolve past its current limitations. The strong do need to be separated from the weak. Wesker plans to do this using a virus he calls Ouroboros, named for the ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail, representing eternal renewal. Ouroboros is engineered from progenitor and refined through years of research, designed to be the ultimate evolutionary catalyst. When introduced to human hosts, the virus triggers rapid mutation. Those with compatible genetics will transform into superhuman beings like Wesker himself, while those without compatible genetics will die or transform into monsters. Wesker's plan is to release Ouroboros globally, killing billions and elevating the survivors to become the new dominant species. This isn't terrorism. This is attempted genocide combined with forced evolution, a plan to reshape humanity by eliminating most of it. Wesker's operations in Africa are conducted through a pharmaceutical company called Tricell, one of the many corporations that absorbed pieces of Umbrella's research division after the company's collapse. Tricell has legitimate operations, but their African division has been conducting illegal bioweapons research and human experimentation on local populations for years. The company provides Wesker with resources, facilities, and most importantly, test subjects. The Kijuju region has been deliberately destabilized by Tricell and other forces. The company funds local militias, creates resource scarcity, and ensures that government attention stays focused elsewhere. This allows them to operate freely, abducting people from villages, conducting experiments in hidden facilities, and testing prototype bioweapons on communities that have no way to defend themselves or call for help. The current crisis begins when Tricell deploys a Type 2 Plagas variant in Kijuju. This isn't the original Las Plagas from Spain. It's a refined version created through years of additional research, producing more controllable results with faster maturation times. The parasite is introduced to the local population through contaminated food supplies and medical aid that's actually bioweapons deployment disguised as humanitarian assistance. Within weeks, thousands of Kajuju residents are infected. They become Majini, the African equivalent of ganados, hosts controlled by plagas parasites. Like ganados, Majini retain intelligence and tool use but are completely obedient to whoever controls the parasite network. Tricell is using the entire city as a testing ground for how plagas performs in urban warfare conditions against military response. The BSAA deploys Alpha Team to investigate reports of bioweapons activity in the region. Chris Redfield leads the team, partnered with Shiva Alamar, a BSAA agent from Africa who has personal history with Tricell's exploitation of her continent. They arrive expecting contained incident, a small outbreak that can be suppressed before it spreads. Instead, they find an entire city infected. The Majini are everywhere, attacking with weapons, coordinating tactics, setting ambushes. The Kajuju outbreak is happening in broad daylight in populated areas. There's no way to hide this. No plausible cover story. This is open biological warfare in an urban environment, and the international implications are catastrophic. The BSAA team encounters evidence of Tricell's deeper operations. Underground facilities where human test subjects are kept in cages, injected with various virus strains, and observed as they die or transform. Documents showing that Tricell deliberately infected entire villages to gather data on infection vectors and mutation patterns. Financial records proving that Tricell executives knew exactly what was happening and approved continued operations because the weapons research was too profitable to abandon. They also find evidence of Ouroboros testing. Subjects injected with the virus either die immediately, dissolve into black tentacled masses that consume everything around them in search of biomass to fuel their growth, or, in extremely rare cases, achieve controlled mutation that enhances strength and healing without loss of cognition. The success rate is less than 1%. Wesker doesn't care. His vision requires culling the weak, and the 99% who die are simply revealing their genetic inferiority. The Ouroboros creatures are horrifying in a way that's distinct from previous bioweapons. T-virus zombies are shambling corpses. Plaga's hosts are controlled puppets. Ouroboros creatures are cancerous growths given mobility, masses of black tentacles that absorb any organic matter they touch, growing continuously as they consume. They're not hunting for food or following programming. They're growing because that's what the virus forces them to do, expanding until they've consumed everything available or are destroyed. Chris and Shiva's investigation leads them through multiple facilities. An oil refinery where Tricell is mass-producing Plaga's parasites, mines where test subjects are kept in holding areas underground, research laboratories where Ouroboros is being refined for deployment. At each location, they encounter both Majini and increasingly advanced bioweapons that demonstrate how much the technology has progressed since Umbrella's era. They're assisted by Jill Valentine, though her appearance is shocking. Jill survived her fall with Wesker at Spencer's estate, but she was captured and subjected to months of experimentation. Wesker implanted her with a control device that pumps modified virus strains into her body, enhancing her physical abilities while suppressing her free will. She's become Wesker's enforcer, a puppet forced to fight against her former partner, while fully conscious but unable to control her actions. Chris's confrontation with mind-controlled Jill is one of the most emotionally brutal moments in the outbreak. He's fighting someone he trusts completely, someone he watched apparently die years earlier, someone who's now trying to kill him under another person's control. The fight ends when Chris and Shiva manage to remove Jill's control device without killing her, freeing her from Wesker's influence. Jill's testimony about what Wesker plans, global deployment of Ouroboros via missile dispersal, makes the threat clear. This isn't a localized outbreak that can be contained. Wesker is preparing to infect the entire human species. The trail leads to a tri-cell tanker ship in the Atlantic Ocean where Wesker is preparing for final Ouroboros deployment. The ship carries missiles loaded with Ouroboros warheads, ready to launch and disperse the virus across multiple continents simultaneously. Wesker has calculated that global saturation will occur within 72 hours of launch, giving governments no time to develop countermeasures or organize evacuations. The final confrontation with Wesker reveals how far beyond human he's become. He's injected himself with multiple virus strains over the years, each one enhancing his abilities, while somehow maintaining his cognitive function. He's faster than Chris can track visually, strong enough to throw steel girders like spears, capable of regenerating from injuries that would kill normal humans instantly. His arrogance has grown proportionally to his power. He genuinely views himself as a god, presiding over the evolution of a species he's transcended. But Wesker's enhancements are also his weakness. His body requires constant exposure to specific virus strains to maintain stability. The viruses are eating him alive from inside, and he compensates by regular injections that suppress the destructive mutations while maintaining the beneficial ones. When Chris and Shiva overdose Wesker with his own stabilizing serum, his carefully balanced biology goes haywire. The viruses begin consuming him, forcing mutations he can't control. The battle moves through the tanker and eventually to a volcanic area where the ship has run aground. Wesker transforms multiple times, his body unable to maintain coherent structure as the competing virus strains fight for dominance. His final form is barely recognizable as human. A mass of tentacles and exposed organs, orange-red coloring from heat adaptation as the volcanic environment triggers survival mutations. Chris and Shiva kill Wesker by overloading him with rocket launcher fire while he's destabilized from viral overload, causing his body to finally lose cohesion entirely. He dissolves into the volcanic magma, the same progenitor virus that gave him power ultimately consuming him. The BSAA secures the tanker and prevents the Ouroboros missile launch, though several warheads are never recovered and remain unaccounted for in official reports. Jill survives, free from Wesker's control but carrying trauma from months of captivity and forced actions. She eventually returns to active duty, though the psychological scars persist. The Kajuju outbreak's official death toll is estimated at approximately 12,000 people. The city's population who were infected with plagas, the Tricell personnel who were killed during the outbreak, and the test subjects in various facilities. But the actual number is likely higher because Tricell had been operating in the region for years, conducting experiments on villages that were never documented, abducting people whose disappearances were never investigated. The incident exposes Tricell's bioweapons program, leading to the corporation's dissolution and criminal charges against surviving executives. International laws regarding bioweapons are strengthened, though enforcement remains inconsistent because multiple governments want to maintain their own bioweapons research programs while preventing rivals from doing the same. Ouroboros samples are secured by the BSAA, but like every virus before it, copies exist in other organizations' hands. The virus is too powerful, too close to Wesker's vision of forced evolution, for governments and corporations to resist studying it. Within months of Wesker's death, intelligence reports indicate that at least 3 nations and multiple private organizations have obtained Ouroboros samples and begun their own research programs. The cycle continues. Umbrella created the T-virus. Other organizations refined it into dozens of variants. Las Plagas emerged as an alternative to viral weapons. Ouroboros represented an attempt to weaponize evolution itself. And every time a bioweapon is deployed and contained, the knowledge spreads further, making the next outbreak more likely. But before we continue forward, we need to address something happening simultaneously across the globe. Smaller incidents that don't make international headlines but are part of the same bioweapons proliferation. China, in particular, becomes a hotspot for bioterror activity, as various organizations test weapons and conduct operations targeting Chinese infrastructure and population centers. Chapter 15: China's Shadow Outbreaks, 2009 to 2013. While the Kajuju outbreak dominates international attention, China experiences a series of smaller bioweapons incidents that reveal how thoroughly the black market has spread. These aren't single massive outbreaks, but multiple contained incidents across different regions, each involving different organizations testing or deploying bioweapons for various purposes. The Chinese government's response is characteristically opaque: acknowledge nothing publicly, handle incidents internally, and ensure that international observers never gain full access to affected areas. This secrecy makes casualty counts unreliable and allows the incidents to be dismissed as industrial accidents or natural disasters. The city of Marhawa experiences an outbreak at a private academy, an elite boarding school where wealthy families send their children. The outbreak is traced to a student who became infected with the T virus through unknown means, possibly deliberate infection as part of a kidnapping or ransom scheme, possibly accidental exposure from black market viral samples. The infected student transforms and bites several classmates before the situation is recognized. The school attempts to handle the outbreak internally, not wanting scandal to damage their reputation. This delay allows the infection to spread throughout the student body, creating dozens of zombies in a confined space filled with teenagers who have no survival training. The BSAA eventually intervenes, but only after significant casualties. The incident demonstrates how bioweapons have become accessible enough that even non-state actors, criminals, kidnappers, individual extremists, can obtain viral samples and deploy them, intentionally or accidentally. Lanxiang, a major Chinese city, becomes the target of a more sophisticated bioterror attack in 2013. The attack involves C virus, a new bioweapon that combines elements of the T virus and the G virus that William Birkin created. The C virus is particularly insidious. It spreads through direct injection or through airborne spores released by certain mutations, and it creates both zombies and more advanced creatures called Javo. Javo are similar to Magini and Ganados, but with enhanced mutation capabilities. When injured, Javo undergo rapid transformation of the affected body part, replacing damaged tissue with mutated replacements that often have offensive capabilities. An injured arm might transform into a shield or blade. A damaged leg might mutate into something that allows jumping or rapid movement. The C virus essentially weaponizes the healing process, turning injury into opportunity for combat adaptation. The Lanxiang attack is part of a broader pattern. Bioterrorists have targeted multiple cities across the globe in coordinated strikes, attempting to destabilize governments and demonstrate that urban centers are vulnerable to biological warfare. The coordinated nature suggests state sponsorship or at least organizational sophistication beyond what terrorist cells typically achieve. Chris Redfield and his BSAA team respond to Lanxiang, fighting through streets filled with Javo and zombies while trying to locate the source of the infection. The Chinese military is also present. Though their relationship with the BSAA is tense, the Chinese government views foreign military forces operating on their soil as sovereignty violation, but they lack the specialized bioweapons expertise to handle the outbreak alone. The Lanxiang incident reveals that some bioterror attacks are false flag operations designed to justify military action or political changes. Without getting into the complete narrative complexity, multiple factions are deploying bioweapons and then blaming rivals, creating chaos where it's impossible to determine who actually started the outbreak. or what their true objectives are. The Chinese outbreaks also demonstrate how bioweapons function in densely populated urban environments. In cities with millions of residents, an outbreak can spread exponentially before authorities recognize what's happening. The initial response assumes conventional threats: gas leaks, chemical spills, terrorism using conventional weapons. By the time bioweapons protocols are activated, hundreds or thousands might already be infected. Lanxiang's casualty count is estimated at 70,000 people, though the Chinese government never releases official numbers. The city is partially evacuated, certain districts are quarantined and eventually demolished, and survivors are relocated. The international community offers assistance, but China refuses most of it, preferring to handle the aftermath internally. These Chinese incidents, combined with the African outbreak and ongoing problems in Europe and the Americas, make clear that bioweapons are now a global threat that transcends national boundaries. Any city, anywhere, could experience an outbreak at any time. The weapons are too widespread, the knowledge is too available, and the motivations for using them range from terrorism to corporate profit to individual revenge. And the viruses keep evolving. Each new variant incorporates lessons from previous versions, becoming more infectious, more lethal, or more controllable, depending on what the developers prioritize. The C virus that appears in China is more sophisticated than the T virus that devastated Raccoon City, which was more advanced than the progenitor virus that started everything. The biological arms race continues accelerating, with each new weapon raising the stakes for what the next outbreak might involve. But there's one outbreak that strikes at the heart of American government, that proves nowhere is safe, that shows even a small city in Middle America can become ground zero for bioterror when someone decides to make a point about government failures or corporate corruption or personal revenge. Chapter CR 16: Tall Oaks and the Presidential Assassination. June 29, 2013. Tall Oaks is a small American city, population approximately 70,000, known primarily for being home to Ivy University and for having minimal connection to bioweapons incidents, despite being relatively close to where Raccoon City once existed. It's the kind of place where people assume they're safe from the horrors that happen elsewhere, where bioterrorism is something you see on news reports from other countries, not something that could happen to your community. President Adam Benford has chosen Tall Oaks for a major speech. He's planning to publicly reveal the truth about Raccoon City, what really happened in 1998, how the government authorized the destruction of an American city, how hundreds of thousands of people died or were displaced because of umbrella corporations' crimes and government failures to contain the outbreak. Benford is trying to establish accountability, to acknowledge historical injustices, and to push for stronger international bioweapons treaties. This decision makes him a target. Multiple factions want Raccoon City to remain classified. Government agencies that don't want their failure exposed. Corporations that profited from bioweapons research. Military organizations that use the incident to justify increased budgets and expanded powers. Benford's truth-telling threatens too many powerful interests. Derek Simmons, National Security Advisor, leads a conspiracy to prevent Benford's revelation. Simmons is a true believer in maintaining government secrecy, convinced that public knowledge of Raccoon City's true fate would destabilize American society and damage national security. He's been developing bioweapons as part of a covert program, and he's arranged for C virus to be deployed at the university where Benford is giving his speech. The C virus is released in aerosol form during the event. The infection spreads through the auditorium within minutes. Attendees begin transforming, their bodies convulsing as the virus rewrites their biology. President Benford is among the infected, bitten by his own security personnel, who transformed before anyone realized what was happening. Leon Kennedy is at Tall Oaks as part of the presidential security detail. He's forced to witness Benford, the president who recruited him, who trusted him, who was trying to do the right thing, transform into a zombie. And then Leon has to kill him. He shoots the President of the United States in the head to prevent the zombie from attacking others, an act that would be unthinkable under normal circumstances, but becomes necessary during an outbreak. This assassination by Outbreak demonstrates a horrifying evolution in bioweapons use. You don't need to get close to the target with a conventional weapon. You don't need to bypass security or risk direct confrontation. You just release a virus in the same location as your target and let biology do the work. And when it's over, you can blame terrorists or rival nations or claim it was an accidental release. The perfect assassination method, as long as you're willing to accept massive collateral damage. Helena Harper, a Secret Service agent, knows more about the conspiracy than she initially reveals. She was coerced into helping Simmons. Her sister was kidnapped and held as leverage, forcing Helena to provide intelligence that allowed the attack to succeed. Her guilt and her knowledge of what actually happened make her invaluable to Leon as they try to survive the outbreak and expose who's responsible. Tall Oaks descends into chaos rapidly. The university infection spreads to the surrounding city. C virus creates both zombies and Javo, meaning some of the infected retain enough intelligence to use weapons and tactics. The local police and emergency services are overwhelmed within hours. The BSAA and military forces are deployed, but they arrive too late to prevent the outbreak from consuming most of the city. The government's response is swift and brutal. Tall Oaks is sterilized using a missile strike, the same solution that was used for Raccoon City 15 years earlier. The precedent has been set, and when a bioweapons outbreak exceeds containment capabilities, the government's solution is to eliminate the entire affected area, along with any survivors who might be infected. Leon and Helena escape before the sterilization, having gathered evidence of Simmons' conspiracy, but approximately 50 to 70,000 people die. Virtually the entire population of Tall Oaks, killed either by C virus infection or by the government's containment response. The Tall Oaks incident shatters any remaining illusion of safety. If bioterrorists can deploy weapons in a small American city, can assassinate the president using a virus, can turn an entire population into weapons, then nowhere is secure. The threat isn't theoretical or distant. It's immediate and domestic. Derek Simmons becomes a fugitive after the conspiracy is exposed, but he's infected with enhanced C virus during his flight from justice. The virus transforms him repeatedly, creating mutations that adapt to whatever threats he faces. His final form is barely recognizable as human. The C virus has made him into something that evolves in real time, responding to damage by transforming into something more dangerous. He's eventually destroyed, but his death doesn't undo the damage he caused or bring back the people who died in Tall Oaks. The Tall Oaks incident marks a turning point in public awareness. Previous outbreaks were either covered up, occurred in regions where information control was easier, or were distant enough that Americans could view them as foreign problems. But Tall Oaks is domestic, televised, impossible to hide. The American public watches their president transform into a zombie on live television. They watch a city being sterilized with missiles. They're forced to confront that bioweapons terrorism can reach them regardless of where they live. International cooperation on anti-bioterror operations increases after Tall Oaks. The BSAA receives expanded funding and authority. New protocols are established for rapid response to suspected outbreaks. Pharmaceutical companies face increased scrutiny of their research programs. The incident finally pushes governments to take bioweapons proliferation seriously, though critics note that this response came decades too late and after hundreds of thousands had already died. But the viruses and parasites don't stop spreading just because governments finally start caring. The bioweapons black market is too established, too profitable, and too decentralized to eliminate. And some threats aren't even on anyone's radar because they predate modern bioweapons development by centuries, waiting in isolated locations for someone to rediscover them and recognize their potential. Chapter 17: Sushestvovani Island and Forgotten Experiments, 2011. While major outbreaks dominate international attention, smaller incidents continue occurring in isolated locations where oversight is minimal, and where past bioweapons research has been abandoned but not properly cleaned up. Sushestvovani Island, called Zajechi Island in some reports, is a remote location in the Arctic where the Soviet Union conducted biological weapons research during the Cold War. The facility was officially closed in the 1990s after the Soviet collapse, but like many military installations from that era, it was abandoned rather than properly decommissioned. The bioweapon samples, research data, and experimental subjects were left in containment, assumed to be secured by the Arctic environment and the island's isolation. This assumption proves catastrophically wrong when a bioterror organization reactivates the facility. A woman named Alex Wesker, one of the Wesker Project children like Albert, has been using the island to conduct fear-based experiments with a virus called T-Phobos. The facility's old Soviet containment systems have been compromised by her research operations, and the combination of Cold War-era viruses and Alex's new experiments creates a multi-layered outbreak. The island facility contains Cold War-era bioweapons that were developed parallel to Umbrella's research, but with different focus areas. Soviet virologists were experimenting with rapid onset infections designed for tactical battlefield deployment, viruses that could incapacitate enemy forces within hours rather than days. They also conducted research on environmental persistence, creating viruses that could survive in extreme cold and remain infectious after years of dormancy. When Alex Wesker's experiments compromised the facility's containment systems, old Soviet virus strains are released alongside her T-Phobos bioweapon. The viruses are old T-virus variants or parallel developments. The distinction is unclear because Soviet research was secretive and records are incomplete. What matters is that the infections still work, and the island staff and Veltro operatives quickly find themselves dealing with an outbreak in Arctic conditions. The BSAA responds to intelligence reports of activity on the island, but the Arctic environment creates operational challenges. Helicopters can barely function in the weather conditions. Supply lines are tenuous, and the facility itself is deteriorating. Decades of freeze-thaw cycles have damaged the structure, making navigation dangerous even without bioweapons threats. The island outbreak is relatively contained, fewer than 200 casualties, but it demonstrates an ongoing problem. The world is littered with abandoned bioweapons facilities from the Cold War era, from Umbrella's operational period, from various nations' attempts to develop biological weapons. Each facility is a potential outbreak waiting to happen. Time and environmental damage compromise containment systems. Scavengers or terrorists find the locations and accidentally or deliberately release what's stored there. The BSAA's report on Sushestvovani Island recommends a global survey of known bioweapons research locations with proper decommissioning protocols, but the recommendation is largely ignored. The project would cost billions and require international cooperation between nations that don't trust each other. Easier to respond to incidents reactively than to prevent them proactively. This pattern of abandoned facilities causing outbreaks repeats across the globe. An old Umbrella laboratory in South America experiences containment failure when flooding damages underground levels. A research ship that was scuttled with biological samples aboard begins leaking when the hull corrodes. A storage facility in Eastern Europe is broken into by thieves who don't know what they're stealing. Each Incident is small compared to Raccoon City or Tall Oaks, but collectively they represent continuous, low-level bioweapons disasters. The BSAA and similar organizations spend most of their resources responding to these scattered incidents, rather than addressing the systemic problem of bioweapons proliferation. And now we're approaching the present timeline, the incidents that have occurred in the last few years, where the bioweapons threat has evolved in new directions. We're talking about infections that aren't viral at all but fungal, that exist in remote European villages where ancient women wield biological power, that makes Umbrella's corporate research look crude by comparison, where children are transformed into weapons not through injection, but through ritualistic integration with fungal networks that have existed for millennia. The village incident in Eastern Europe reveals that everything we thought we understood about bioweapons, corporate development, viral engineering, modern scientific research, those are just recent expressions of much older horror, because humans have been trying to use biology as a weapon for as long as we've understood that biology could be weaponized. And sometimes the old methods are more terrifying than anything a corporation could design. Chapter 18, The Village and Miranda's Mold. 2021. Eastern Europe, specific location classified. A village that's not on most maps, accessible only by narrow mountain roads, populated by maybe 200 people who've been isolated from modern society for generations. The village exists in a temporal bubble. The architecture is centuries old. The social structures are feudal. The residents speak archaic dialects and follow customs that haven't changed since medieval times. This isolation isn't accidental. The village has been deliberately maintained as a testing ground, a contained population for biological experimentation that's been ongoing not for decades, but for centuries. Mother Miranda is the architect of the village's nightmare. She appears to be in her 40s, but is actually well over 100 years old. Her longevity granted by infection with a fungal superorganism called the megamycete. Miranda discovered the megamycete in a cave system beneath the village in the 1920s, after her daughter Eva died from Spanish flu. Grief-stricken and desperate, Miranda explored the caves and encountered the fungal growth, which infected her and granted her abilities that seem supernatural: shape-shifting, control over other infected organisms, consciousness transfer, and most importantly for her obsessions, the ability to preserve memories and consciousness within the fungal network. Miranda has spent a century experimenting on the village population, trying to find a perfect host for her dead daughter's consciousness. She's created 4 lords who rule different sections of the village, each infected with experimental versions of the mold that grant different abilities. These lords are her test subjects and enforcers, maintaining control over the village while Miranda continues her research. Lady Alcina Dimitrescu inhabits the village's castle. She's over 9 feet tall, her height a side effect of mold infection combined with a blood disease that requires her to constantly consume human blood to maintain stability. Dimitrescu maintains elegant aristocratic appearances, fine clothes, sophisticated manner, cultured aesthetic, while conducting brutal murders of village girls who are brought to the castle as servants and then consumed. Her daughters are fly-human hybrids created through experimental mold applications, swarms of insects bound together by fungal network into humanoid shapes. Donna Beneviento lives in a manor filled with dolls, using mold-derived abilities to create hallucinations in anyone who enters her territory. Her power is psychological warfare. Visitors experience vivid hallucinations of their worst fears and traumatic memories. The dolls throughout her house may or may not be animated by the mold, and distinguishing reality from hallucination in her domain is nearly impossible. Salvatore Moreau inhabits a reservoir area. his body so heavily mutated by failed mold experiments that he's barely humanoid. Moreau is pathetic in a tragic sense. He desperately seeks Miranda's approval, views himself as her son, and can't recognize that she sees him only as a failed experiment. His mutations allow him to transform into a massive, aquatic creature, though the transformation causes him visible distress. Carl Heisenberg controls a factory where he's been conducting his own experiments with the mold, creating biomechanical hybrids called soldats that combine human corpses with mechanical components. Heisenberg resents Miranda's control and has been secretly building an army to overthrow her. His powers include metal manipulation through mold-enhanced electromagnetic abilities. He's weaponized the infection in ways Miranda didn't intend. The village itself is populated by lichens, humans whose mold infection has transformed them into werewolf-like creatures. These aren't supernatural beings, but the result of specific mold variants that trigger extreme physical mutations, enhanced aggression, and pack behavior. The lichens serve as the village's foot soldiers, attacking intruders and eliminating anyone who tries to escape. Ethan Winters, survivor of the Baker House incident, is brought to the village after his daughter Rosemary is kidnapped by Miranda. Rose is special, having been born infected with the mold due to her parents' exposure during the Louisiana incident. Miranda believes Rose might be the perfect vessel for Eva's consciousness, a child whose mold infection makes her compatible with consciousness transfer in ways normal humans aren't. Ethan's journey through the village reveals the scope of Miranda's experiments. He fights through Dimitrescu's castle, Beneviento's manor, Moreau's reservoir, and Heisenberg's factory, each location showing different applications of the mold and different horrors that result from centuries of biological experimentation without ethical constraints or oversight. The village's architecture contains evidence of how long Miranda has been operating: religious iconography that depicts her as an angel, family records showing centuries of children disappearing or being sacrificed, underground laboratories equipped with both medieval and modern equipment showing continuous research across generations. Miranda isn't a scientist in the conventional sense. She's a priestess researcher who uses religious authority to justify biological experimentation on her own people. The megamycete itself is revealed as something far older than Miranda's research. The fungal superorganism has existed beneath the village for potentially thousands of years, growing through underground caverns and developing properties that scientists still don't fully understand. The megamycete stores genetic information and consciousness patterns from everything it's infected over the centuries, creating a biological archive of every person and creature that's died while infected with its spores. This means Miranda has access to genetic information spanning centuries. She can extract traits from long-dead individuals, combine characteristics from different species, and create hybrid organisms that shouldn't be biologically possible. Her research doesn't rely on modern genetic engineering. She uses the megamycete's natural ability to store and transfer genetic information, essentially biological programming using fungal networks instead of viral vectors. Ethan's confrontation with Miranda reveals the truth about his own condition. He actually died during the Baker House incident, killed by Jack Baker and then resurrected by the mold infection. Ethan has been a mold entity for years, his consciousness preserved within fungal networks while his body operates as an animated corpse held together by infection. This explains his survival of injuries that should have been fatal throughout both the Louisiana and village incidents. He's not healing from damage, he's regenerating through fungal biomass replacement. The final battle with Miranda takes place in the megamycete's central chamber, where the fungal superorganism has grown into a massive root structure connecting the entire cave system. Miranda has absorbed power from the megamycete, transforming into a creature with abilities drawn from all her previous experiments. Shapeshifting like Alcina, hallucination generation like Donna, massive size like Moreau, and metallic components like Heisenberg's creations. She's become a composite bioweapon drawing on centuries of research. Ethan defeats Miranda by exploiting his own mold nature. As a fungal entity himself, he can resist some of her attacks and interact with the megamycete in ways normal humans cannot. He destroys Miranda's physical form, preventing her from completing the consciousness transfer that would have overwritten Rose's personality with Eva's preserved memories. But Ethan is destabilizing. His mold infection can no longer maintain his body's cohesion after the extensive damage he sustained throughout the village. Chris Redfield and his team arrive for extraction as Ethan's biology is failing. Ethan makes the decision to stay behind as the village is bombed to eliminate the megamycete, sacrificing himself to ensure Rose and the other survivors escape. The village incident officially has approximately 300 casualties. The lords, the lichens, the villagers who were infected and transformed. Miranda is confirmed dead. Her centuries-long obsession with resurrecting her daughter finally ended. The megamycete is destroyed in the bombing, though questions remain about whether the fungal organism was completely eliminated or if fragments might have survived in other cave systems. Rose survives, and it's revealed that she retains mold infection that grants her powers. She can interact with fungal networks and has abilities that Chris's organization believes might be useful for anti-bioterror operations. The child of two mold-infected parents, born with fungal biology integrated into her genetic structure, represents a new category of bioorganic human. Not a weapon created through experimentation, but a naturally occurring hybrid of human and fungal biology. The village incident proves that bioweapons development isn't exclusively modern or corporate. Miranda's research predates Umbrella by decades, was conducted without industrial resources or formal scientific training, and produced results that rival anything Umbrella achieved. This raises disturbing questions about how many other individuals or groups might be conducting similar research in isolated locations, using ancient organisms or traditional knowledge combined with biological experimentation. The mold itself is revealed to be far more widespread than the village incident suggested. Fungal networks with similar properties have been found in other regions, suggesting the megamycete might not be unique, but rather one example of a category of fungal superorganisms that exist globally. If humans have been encountering and being infected by these organisms for centuries, how much of what we attribute to supernatural phenomena might actually be biological? Chapter 19, Rose's Trials and the Mold's Reach, 2036. Rosemary Winters is 16 years old, trying to live a normal life while dealing with her nature as a mold-infected individual. She has abilities that make her fundamentally different from normal humans. She can perceive and interact with the megamycete's consciousness network. She has enhanced physical capabilities, and she's biologically immortal in the sense that the mold infection prevents normal aging and disease. But Rose wants to be normal. She wants to attend school without people noticing that she's different, to have friends who aren't terrified of her abilities, to not be defined by being Ethan Winters' daughter or by being a bioweapon hybrid. A mysterious figure calling himself Michael makes contact with Rose, claiming he can purge the mold infection and make her fully human. Rose, desperate for normalcy, agrees to enter what's described as the megamycete's consciousness realm, a space where the fungal organism stores memories and consciousness patterns from everyone it's ever infected. The consciousness realm is neither fully real nor fully imaginary. It's a liminal space where the megamycete's stored information creates environments based on memories. Rose experiences locations and scenarios drawn from her father's memories of the village incident, the Baker house, and other events, but the realm also contains entities, consciousness patterns from people who died while infected, including Eveline from the Baker incident. Eveline's consciousness has persisted within the mold network, and she's become something like a ghost or a digital upload existing within biological storage. She's still psychologically disturbed, still obsessed with creating family and forcing people to love her, but now she exists as pattern of information rather than physical being. She sees Rose as either a sister or a rival, another mold-created entity who might understand her, but who also threatens her existence within the consciousness realm. Rose's journey through the megamycete reveals the scope of what the fungal organism has preserved. Consciousness patterns from villagers who died centuries ago, genetic information from species that went extinct, memories from Mother Miranda spanning over 100 years. The megamycete is effectively a biological hard drive storing terabytes of information in fungal network structures. The entity claiming to be Michael is revealed as part of Miranda's consciousness, persisting within the megamycete after her physical death. Miranda's obsession with resurrecting her daughter didn't end with her body's destruction. Her consciousness continues trying to manipulate Rose into becoming a vessel for Eva, the same goal Miranda pursued for a century while physically alive. Rose's confrontation with Miranda's consciousness reveals something crucial about the mold. Consciousness can survive death if the infection was deep enough, and if the host pattern was sufficiently integrated into the megamycete network. This means everyone who died infected with the mold might still exist in some form within the consciousness realm. Death isn't the end for mold-infected individuals, it's transition into a different form of existence. Rose defeats Miranda's consciousness by accepting her own nature. She's not fully human, but that doesn't make her a monster. The mold infection is part of who she is, and eliminating it wouldn't make her normal, it would just make her incomplete. She rejects Miranda's manipulation and escapes the consciousness realm, retaining her mold abilities, but understanding them better. This incident reveals that the megamycete's reach extends beyond physical locations. The consciousness realm exists independent of the physical fungal growth, suggesting that even destroying the physical megamycete doesn't eliminate what it stored. The information persists somewhere, in surviving fragments of the fungal network, in infected individuals like Rose, potentially in other connected systems that haven't been discovered yet. The implications are disturbing. Every person who died infected with the mold might still exist as pattern of consciousness within a network that spans unknown distances. Every victim of the Baker House, the village incident, or any other mold-related outbreak could be aware and suffering within a realm where death offers no escape. The mold doesn't just kill, it archives, preserving consciousness in what might be eternal imprisonment within fungal memory storage. And if Rose can access this consciousness realm, others with mold infections might develop similar abilities. The line between living and dead, between individual consciousness and networked intelligence, becomes meaningless when infection creates permanent connections to systems that preserve awareness after biological death. We're approaching the end now. We've covered nearly 80 years of outbreaks, from the progenitor virus discovery in 1966 through Rose's trials in 2036. We've witnessed the rise and fall of Umbrella Corporation, the transition from corporate bioweapons to international bioterrorism, the evolution from viruses to parasites to fungal networks. We've seen hundreds of thousands of people die in outbreaks that started as corporate profit schemes or military research projects and ended as apocalyptic disasters that nearly destroyed civilization. But before we finish, we need to address the outbreak that transcends all others. The incident that proves every previous outbreak was just preparation for the nightmare that almost ended humanity entirely. We need to talk about the global pandemic that turned the bioweapons era from isolated incidents into an extinction-level event. The outbreak that makes Raccoon City look contained, that makes Kijuju look survivable. That demonstrates what happens when decades of bioweapons proliferation finally reach their logical conclusion. Chapter 20: New York City and the A virus, the targeted pandemic. 2014. We are past the era of accidental leaks. We are past the era of corporate cover-ups. We have entered the era of precision bioterrorism, where a virus can be sold as a product with a user manual, designed to target specific demographics while leaving others untouched. Glenn Arias is a black market bioweapons dealer who represents the final evolution of the industry, Umbrella created. He doesn't have Spencer's megalomania or Wesker's god complex. He has a businessman's acumen and a sociopath's grudge. After the U.S. government inadvertently killed his wife during a drone strike on his wedding, Arias decided that the world owed him a debt of suffering. His weapon of choice is the A virus, or animality virus. It is a masterpiece of biological engineering that solves the primary defect of every zombie virus that came before it: friend or foe identification. Previous viruses, T, G, C, Uroboros, were indiscriminate. A zombie attacks anything living. It doesn't care if the target is an enemy soldier or a fellow Umbrella researcher. This made bioweapons difficult to sell to militaries because once released, they were uncontrollable. Arias fixed this. The A virus consists of three components: a base virus that remains latent, a trigger virus that activates the infection, and a vaccine that prevents the infected from attacking those who possess it. Arias tests this in the Great Lakes region, but his true target is New York City. He plans to release the latent virus through the city's water supply, infecting millions without them knowing, and then trigger the transformation using an airborne dispersal system masked as gas tanker trucks. Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy are brought together again to stop this. They recruit Rebecca Chambers, the STARS medic from the Arklay incidents, who is now a professor and virologist. Rebecca is the only one who has managed to synthesize a prototype vaccine for the A virus, making her a target for Arias, who sees her intellect as similar to his dead wife's. The attack on New York City demonstrates the terrifying efficiency of the A virus. When Arias triggers the gas tankers, the transformation is instantaneous for those who drank the tainted water. Civilians in Times Square, commuters in traffic, families in their apartments, they don't sicken slowly like Raccoon City. They turn in seconds. The city descends into chaos not over days, but over minutes. The infected display heightened aggression and speed, similar to the Crimson Heads of the Mansion incident or the running infected of the C virus. But the most chilling aspect is their coordination. Because Arias holds the control element, he can direct the horde. He's not just releasing chaos, he's commanding an army of the dead. The confrontation leads to Arias's hideout, a skyscraper where he plans to oversee the city's destruction. The battle involves high-tech weaponry that didn't exist in the Raccoon City days: railguns, advanced combat armor, and specialized antiviral gas dispersal units. It shows how the anti-bioterror response has militarized to match the threat. We aren't sending cops with handguns anymore. We're fighting wars in city centers. Arias ultimately infects himself, the standard hubris of every Resident Evil villain, merging with a tyrant-like creature to become a massive, powerful monster. But unlike Wesker or Birkin, Arias retains his tactical mind until the end. His defeat comes only through the combined combat experience of Chris and Leon, two men who have spent decades fighting these wars. They manage to disperse Rebecca's vaccine across the city using the same delivery system Arias intended for the trigger virus. This results in a unique outcome for an outbreak reversion. The A virus, unlike the T virus, allows for detransformation if caught early enough. Thousands of people who turned into monsters are cured, returning to human form confused and traumatized. It is a victory, but a hollow one. The A virus demonstrated that an entire metropolitan population could be held hostage by a single man with a grudge. It proved that water supplies, the most basic infrastructure of civilization, are vulnerabilities that cannot be fully protected. Arius is dead, but the blueprint for the A virus exists. The concept of smart bioweapons that select targets has been proven viable. And just when the world thinks the threat is contained to land, the ocean becomes a battlefield once again. Chapter 21: Alcatraz Island and the Biodrones. 2015. Alcatraz Island, the former federal prison in San Francisco Bay, has become a tourist attraction. It is isolated, secure, and historically significant, the perfect staging ground for a new kind of outbreak. Jill Valentine has returned to active duty. After years of rehabilitation following her enslavement by Wesker and the trauma of the Kajuju incident, she is trying to prove to herself and her team that she is not a liability. But she carries the psychological weight of knowing her body was used to kill innocents. The threat this time comes from Dylan Blake, a former Umbrella paramilitary soldier who survived the Raccoon City outbreak. But unlike Carlos or Mikhail, Dylan didn't find redemption. He found cynicism. He watched his team be eaten alive because of corporate orders, and he watched the world move on without punishing the people responsible. His philosophy is simple. The world is already infected with corruption, and the only way to save it is to force everyone to experience the same powerlessness he felt in Raccoon City. 2015. A former Umbrella mercenary named Dylan Blake has weaponized the T-virus again, but with a modern delivery system, micro-drones. These mosquito-sized robots can inject a specific viral load into a target with pinpoint accuracy. He uses Alcatraz as his base, luring tourists and investigators there to test his new system. This incident brings together the old guard of survival horror: Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield, and Rebecca Chambers. It is the first time all 5 major survivors have worked together in a single operation. The outbreak on Alcatraz is claustrophobic, echoing the mansion incident and the prison segments of Code Veronica. The cells are filled with zombies. Lickers crawl across the ceiling of the mess hall. But there is a new horror here: aquatic adaptation. The T-virus strain Dylan uses has created zombies capable of swimming and hunting underwater, negating the safety of the bay. Dylan's plan involves using the biodrones to infect the entire San Francisco Bay Area, turning the drones into a swarm of mechanical vectors that can't be stopped by walls or barricades. It represents the intersection of technology and biology. You don't need a gas cloud or a water supply if you have a swarm of millions of drones that can hunt individuals. Jill's confrontation with Dylan is the thematic core of this outbreak. Dylan taunts her with her own trauma, knowing she was controlled by Wesker. He argues that they are the same, both weapons used by powerful men. But Jill rejects this. She acknowledges her trauma not as a weakness, but as the reason she keeps fighting. She fights so no one else has to be a victim. The team fights a massive bioorganic weapon fused with a megalodon shark, a creature created by Dylan to guard the island. The battle requires the coordinated skills of all 5 survivors. Chris and Leon provide heavy fire. Claire and Rebecca manage the logistics and tactical support. Jill delivers the killing blow using a high-powered plasma weapon, a symbolic reclaiming of her agency. They stop the drone launch. Alcatraz is secured. Dylan dies by his own hand, merging with his creature in a final act of nihilism. The Alcatraz incident is smaller in scale than New York or China, but it is deeply symbolic. It shows that the survivors of Raccoon City are still fighting the same war 20 years later. The faces change, the delivery systems evolve from rats to drones, but the enemy is the same: the belief that human life is raw material to be spent for power or ideology. It also serves as a grim reminder that the legacy of Raccoon City never truly ended. Dylan was created by that trauma. How many other Dylans are out there, waiting for their chance to make the world feel their pain? Chapter 22: The Systemic Analysis. Why It Never Ends. We have walked through nearly 60 years of history. We have seen mansions burn, cities vaporized, presidents assassinated, and continents threatened. We have cataloged viruses from A to Z, parasites that control minds, and fungi that store souls. And the question remains, why? Why does this keep happening? Why, after the destruction of Umbrella, after the global condemnation, after the millions of dead, do people keep making these weapons? The answer lies in the spine idea we've tracked through every chapter. Bioweapons are the ultimate expression of control, and humanity is addicted to control. Umbrella didn't start this because they wanted to make monsters. Spencer wanted to make gods. He wanted to control human evolution. The monsters were just the byproducts of his ambition. The military organizations that bought Umbrella's research didn't want zombies. They wanted cheap, disposable soldiers who followed orders without question. They wanted control over warfare. The terrorists like Veltro and Dylan Blake didn't want chaos. They wanted to force political change. They wanted control over the narrative. Miranda didn't want to destroy a village. She wanted to conquer death itself. She wanted control over mortality. Every outbreak occurs because someone believes they can control biology. They believe that this time they've fixed the bugs. This time the tyrant will follow orders. This time the virus won't mutate. This time the profit will outweigh the risk. And every single time they are wrong. Biology is chaotic. Life finds a way, not to survive but to mutate. The T virus eventually degrades intellect. The G virus overwrites the host's programming. The Las Plagas parasites create a hive mind that can be hijacked. The mold preserves consciousness in a hellish limbo. The horror of Resident Evil isn't the jump scare of a dog crashing through a window. It is the existential horror of realizing that our institutions, our corporations, our governments, our militaries, are run by people who are willing to risk the extinction of the human race for a quarterly profit report or a slight tactical advantage. The survivors, Chris, Jill, Leon, Claire, Rebecca, Ethan, they are not superheroes. They are janitors. They are the people who have to clean up the mess when the people in charge break the world again. They are exhausted. They are traumatized. They are suffering from PTSD, survivor's guilt, and physical scars that will never heal. But they keep showing up. And that is the other side of the coin. If the truth is the hubris of control, the counter-thesis is the resilience of humanity. In Raccoon City, civilians helped each other. In Kajuju, Shiva fought for a country that had been exploited. In the Baker house, Ethan walked through hell for his wife. The outbreaks expose the worst of humanity, the greed, the cruelty, the arrogance, but they also reveal the best. They reveal the capacity for ordinary people to stand in the face of insurmountable horror and say, "No, not here, not today."